Ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Yeah.
Now for me, that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out. Kind of.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can scratch. With this AI, like scratching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the right
I
spot.
didn't even notice 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.
Oh, it was meant to be
Just
this
meant to
way.
be. but but your room, it was not meant to be that way. You changed it around.
No, now it's the
So
other
now it is
way.
meant to be different.
I was
Messing
hoping to
everything all up. So do we have to move you to the other side now?
well, I was hoping to bring the music
Move
machine
you over
in,
that way.
but the music machine does not want to get into the restream.
Nah, that's all right.
Gonna have to do
Maybe
some
next
more
time.
testing.
Hmm. I like the look though. Looking down the keyboard from this side looks very cool.
Looking down a
We got a
musical
bunch of stuff
tunnel.
lined up for us this week. Yeah.
Yeah, we got kind of a guitar night tonight.
Yep. Back and forth with a few different things. One for a setup, some for intonation, some for just gear in general. We have a few
Some
different
for
things.
deadheads.
Ah, yes.
We actually got 2 for deadheads.
Nice. I love it.
Oh, and this one I'm interested in how you unlock your guitar playing forever.
That one's very interesting. Like one, just a quick thing on that one is the whole when we talk about the 1-4-5 or we talk about the 2 and the 3 and the 6, you know, the 1-4-5 are major, the 2, 3, and 6 are minor. When we're talking about the chords that are in a key, diatonic chords in a key, and this is an interesting way of looking at it on stringed instruments and a way of seeing where the chord shapes are and how you can just use, you know, one major and one minor shape rooted on the 6th string and one major and one minor shape rooted on the 5th string to cover all 6 of those chords, and that way you can play any song in any key just by sliding that shape wherever on the neck. So that'll be a good one.
Oh, and speaking of major and minor, there's one in here we'll get to in a second. That's
Mhm.
all about
Yeah, yeah,
that.
exactly. This is the one for intonation, I believe, on the bench. Yep, yep.
Yeah, and this is always an important subject
Yeah,
to
we've
cover.
talked about it a couple times. This is one that it actually gives a good visual, like shows with, you know, several different tuners. Like on his desk there, you see he's got 3 tuners. He's got the clip-on tuner on the headstock. He's got a pedal tuner in the middle, and then he's got a strobe tuner on the right, just to the right of that one. So you can see he's got 3 tuners hooked up in a row, not because you need 3 tuners in a row, but just to show you what it looks like when you're doing the process on, you know, each of the different tuners.
Oh, I thought he was just
So,
being really anal.
well, you will see that some are more useful than others. Like some are, you know, much more finicky, let's say, or they, you know, they're able to show you a note. I have issues even just with, you know, sometimes it would be like a snark tuner, like the clip on that he has there is probably one of the little snarks like this guy. But I also had an older one that's, you know, just a same idea, just a clip on, you know, clip on tuner that I use. But the idea is that, you know, it reads from the vibrations, and some of them don't read very well in all places on the guitar, and some don't read very well on certain guitars. So like if I'm trying to tune my low B string, it doesn't come in well on that tuner. So I have to sit there and work at it to try to get it to tune on the note D at the 3rd fret.
So
And that's where I usually work
it
with it.
really doesn't hurt to have at least 2 types of tuners just in case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, there's always, you know, you lend one to somebody and then, you know, you got to make sure you get it back. But if they need it during the gig, you know, leave it with them. And then you've got another one as a backup that you can use. You know, that's never a bad idea either.
Well, this is why I don't lend shit to anybody.
That's another good point. Yeah. Keep an eye on your shit.
So we got a little bit of
Ah, yes.
mixing and mastering too, mastering a limited mix.
Yep. And we see a lot of that with, we saw a lot of it even when they first started doing mastering in BandLab, when you would see the wave files that are a solid brick. But, you know, in some cases, it wasn't necessarily a problem. It was just the way that mastering made it turn out. But in other cases, you can definitely hear that the mix was, you know, chopped at that point. And this is some helpful tips on how to deal with that situation.
And definitely, you can't always trust what you see in your wave, especially on
Yep.
BandLab. Like the waves don't always represent the sound that you hear.
Yeah, I've seen you know, waves where it looks like just a line down the center with just little bumps here and there, and it turns out to be a perfectly usable bass track.
Yeah.
You know, it was something that was in there. It was represented well enough with, you know, little enough noise that we were able to boost it no problems. But that won't always be the case.
Yeah, I think the wave sometimes gets confused from the compression, and it just shows like these peaked out waves, but you don't hear them. And when you don't hear them, it means it's not truly representing those levels.
Mhm. Yep.
Oh, this one I stumbled across today while I was looking for guitar stuff and guitar modding. You know, since we're
Nice.
talking about intonation and things like that, modding a guitar seems like a lot of fun, and she's a pro at it.
Excellent. That'll be a good one. That's a new find for me too.
Yeah, and then you know, me and James talking the other night about how to play faster and techniques. I couldn't resist this one.
Nice.
Plus, she likes the turtles, so she's cool.
Nice. There you go. I see one talking about like a spider walk exercise. That's one that we'll look at another
Yeah,
time.
and they mentioned that, like, that's the
Mhm.
typical technique that they help students to increase their speed, but
Right.
they're actually going to mention some alternate techniques that some of
Hmm.
them think might work a little better.
Oh yeah. And for me, one of the biggest things is just making sure that you pick it up and play at least a little bit every day, even just 5 minutes. Even if you don't play anything specific, you could just play the frets, just better, 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 just to get your fingers doing that. And that way, if it you don't go weeks without doing it, and because if you do, if you go weeks without playing at all, you go to pick it up, you might start getting blisters right away, or your hands aren't you're not feeling strong enough or whatever. But if you just kick it, pick it up and just do whatever for at least 5 minutes every day, that's a great start,
And
and then you can build on that.
those blisters turn to calluses after a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Or your hands just don't care anymore. You play for hours, your hands are like, what? No problem.
It is almost like music
Music
surgery.
surgery. Yeah. I love it.
And he's going to be focusing on guitar EQ tricks and how
Mhm.
some of these guitarists can get really nice loud guitars that sound pleasing. So I thought that was going
Mhm.
to be an interesting one.
Nice.
Oh, and you remember Samurai? Like
Yes, indeed.
I continue to go back to, he's got so many cool, and he's got a
Yeah.
whole series just on different weird guitars. And this one is actually going to be covering an old school guitar. Casio came out with a digital MIDI guitar back in the 90s, and
Nice.
he's gonna put it through the ringer.
Nice. Casio. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Would not have expected that for a guitar
Oh,
brand.
nobody expected Casio to come out with a guitar.
Nobody expects.
And this is another one that, like, cadences.
Yeah.
These are the musical terms that you hear, but you don't always know what they are. And there's
Mhm.
four of them that.
Yep. If somebody walked up and said, "What is the Plagal cadence?" You probably would recognize it if you heard it, but could you define it? So this will help with that.
Oh, and the minor to major relation,
Yes.
or major to minor, and
Mhm.
changing a song from one to the other, and the difference that you get when you do so.
Yeah.
And this one comes
Very
from
cool.
David Bennett, so it's
Mhm.
good.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a revisit. We've been there many times.
And
Good resources.
this is one that I was talking about when we were looking at some of the other controllers the last couple weeks, the MPE
Hmm.
controllers. And
Right. Right.
this one's making a lot of noise on YouTube. A lot of these beat makers, synth guys, they're
Hmm.
raving about this thing.
Nice. The
A-
Porsche.
it may be because a lot of them are Ableton users, and this is one of
Mhm.
those that was like made to take the power of Ableton, but it also works with any DAW. So I'm
Mhm.
curious to see what features are making this such an appealing new instrument.
I even like just what I see in that little thumbnail right there. I'm intrigued. We'll see some good stuff there.
Yeah, and those pads, when you see it in action, they look
Hmm.
cool. And
Yeah.
we've been talking the last couple weeks about building a music PC, and we're probably gonna be doing that soon.
Yeah. We
If
have a few people lined up who are looking for new machines.
yeah, if not for a client, I want an i9 sooner
Yeah.
than later.
Let's get t-shirts made up. I want an i9.
So
Will work for an
so
i9.
he's going to go over things that, like, Windows is a great operating system. A lot of times you hear people like, oh, you need a Mac for music, and I almost threw a video in to counter argue with the Mac side and why Macs can be good for music. But
Oh yeah.
I think this is an interesting discussion, because on the Windows side, if these things can get fixed, or what to tweak, Windows makes a
Hmm.
great music machine.
Yep. And that's the thing is to me there's no one right answer as to Mac versus PC. I have always leaned PC. All the time I've always leaned away from Mac, but that's more based on what I was doing versus any grievance with Mac itself. But again, I've seen people do very well with Mac on music, and I've seen people do very well PC with music.
Yeah.
So it's all about how you use the tools. It's not about you have to have this or you have to have that. Take the tools that you have and take the tools that you can reasonably acquire, and build what you can from there.
Yeah, if a client came to me and said, I want to get a music machine and didn't know whether they wanted a Mac or a PC, I'd be asking them what they've used in the past as the first consideration,
Learning
and
curve, sure.
and what they have for equipment or what they think they might be getting for equipment. And then you kind of weigh the benefits or the disadvantages between the two operating systems.
Yep. Also, if they do plan to do other things with the machine, that can be an important consideration as well.
Yeah. Then you start adding those factors in. Plus, I liked his shirt.
Excellent.
Yeah, he's another new
We
find.
did say a red shirt. So there it is. Another new find. Yep. Subscribe.
And sometimes it's got to be analog.
That's right.
So the one that I think we're going to start with, just to show off unique toys, Samurai's digital guitar here. I think this is
Nice.
a good way to lead into our guitar night.
I like it.
Digital freak show of a guitar.
And we've seen some freak shows for guitars, so I'm intrigued. Let's see what we have here.
We got to find him over on the...
yes, over here.
The Lipe.
Indeed.
There he is. So this one is coming from Samurai Guitarist, which I believe that is his YouTube. Yep, at Samurai Guitarist over on YouTube. And if you like freaky guitars, you will love this channel.
Good stuff.
Everyone, and welcome back to the series where I demo the world's weirdest guitars. Today we are checking out a monstrosity from the 80s, the Casio DG20. Have you ever wondered what it would sound like if a cheap keyboard had a child with a guitar? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of that age-old question soon. But before we get into it, I want to quickly let you know some especially exciting news. As of today, I have just launched a brand new guitar course called Samurai Guitar Theory Beyond the Basics. This course is aimed at the intermediate guitarist looking to take their understanding to the next level. Among the things I look at are more complex chords, a deep dive into modes, it's all professionally animated, there's in-depth documentation, quizzes, lists of things to practice, and more. This initial month, it's 50% off with promo code EARLYBIRD. And if you buy it bundled together with my first course, The Rudiments, you can get both of them for the normal price of one using that same promo code. Links to that are in the description, or you can find it at www.samuraiguitartheory.com. Don't forget to use promo code EARLYBIRD. Anyways, on to the weirdness. Today's instrument, the Casio DG20, is truly unlike anything else I've ever seen. It's a plastic digital guitar made in Japan in the late 80s, and it looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie more than it does my guitar collection. Now, playing guitar is pretty simple when you think about it. You put a string into motion by hitting it, producing a sound. That vibration is amplified in one way or another. You do this well, and you're making music. The way that the DG20 works is completely different. Built into this thing is a synthesizer, a piece of technology that digitally generates a sound. The guitar part of it sends information to the synthesizer, telling it what sounds to produce. I'll get into more details in a bit. For now, I think it's best just to show you what this can do. I've got the acoustic guitar setting selected. I'm going to kick in the drum machine, hit the mood lights, and see what happens. Many guitarists spend thousands of dollars on boutique gear chasing a pure and beautiful tone. I spent $300 on this, and now I sound like a Nintendo Wii menu. Let's go over the features that this spaceship-looking freak show has to offer. First of all, there's a drum machine built in. Like you heard, I can select a number of different beats, like reggae for example. I can cue it to do a fill, or I can perform a fill myself using these pads here. Nothing overly exciting or groundbreaking there. I'm personally more interested in the guitar synth side of things. The layout is that of a typical guitar. There are 6 strings, and the rubber fretboard is laid out like a normal one. The strings, however, are plastic and untuned. If I strum them acoustically, it wouldn't really make much of a noise since they're so slack. The way this works is I put my finger on one of the strings on one of the frets, which tells the synthesizer which note I've selected. When I hit the string, it tells the synthesizer to turn on that note. So the way you conceptualize and play this instrument is the same as a normal guitar, but there's nothing acoustically happening. It's all just a bunch of ones and zeros being chucked around inside a computer. Now let me tell you, while you think about it like a normal guitar, you kind of have to play it with a unique touch. It picks up the slightest accidental bumps of a fret or string and plays those notes as loud as the notes that you want to play. So you need to be rather precise and gentle, otherwise it sounds quite ugly. Let me show you what it sounds like if I tried to play this thing like how I play my normal guitars. To me, that sounds like if somebody programmed a robot to play music, but they made a horrible, horrible mistake in the code. Since there's no string tension, I find that playing with a pick doesn't really work. Instead, finger picking offers much more control. Here's that same example that you just heard with significantly more precision. Still isn't amazing by any means, but at least it's coherent. What does make this thing quite fun is the wide range of sounds. Here's a jazz organ, for example. I guarantee you, someone somewhere in 1987 would have played one of these at their Sunday morning church service. And what a sight that would have been. Let's check out another setting. How about distorted guitar? I've made worse sounds in my life. That one was actually pretty fun. Let's try out the mandolin setting. If the boss theme from a vintage NES game sounded like a mandolin, then that would have been pretty dang close. Now, how about my personal favorite? Funky clavinet. That one setting alone makes this thing worth it. If I retire from YouTube, I'm telling you right now, it's because I've gone out into the world to try to make it as a DG20 funky clavinetist. So that brings us to the point of the video where I give you the official Sammy G review. Ultimately, this is more of a toy than it is a serious instrument. The sounds aren't amazing, but I'm a terrible keyboard player, so to be able to get those synth sounds is really quite fun. It's easy to use. As a guitarist, I find a lot of synths somewhat overwhelming, but with this, there's no technological learning curve. You just turn it on and you're ready to go. You don't even need to plug it into anything. I ran a cable out into my recording software and used the power supply, but there's also a battery pack and a speaker built in case you want to take it to the campfire. The biggest issue I have with this thing is the playability, which unfortunately prevents it from having any real practical value. Even with quite a bit of practice, it would regularly spew out loud, rogue notes. Every example you heard today took me far more takes to get sounding good than normal. Final verdict, it's quite fun to play around with. They're pretty cheap, but if you want the sounds that this thing does in a professional setting, you're better off getting a MIDI pickup or learning to play the piano. To wrap it up, here's a jam I made entirely using sounds from the Casio DG20. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I want to remind you that my second guitar course, Samurai Guitar Theory Beyond the Basics, has just been released. I'm especially excited to be able to offer something to the intermediate guitar player looking to take their playing to the next level. I never considered myself all that naturally talented. In order to get where I am, I needed to develop a musical system. That system is what I teach in my courses. There's some tougher concepts that I go through, like modes and extended chords that many of us struggle with, which is why I hired a professional animator to make those things as clear and intuitive as possible. For this month, Beyond the Basics is 50% off with promo code EARLYBIRD, and if you buy that bundled together with my first course, you can get that one for 50% off as well with the same promo code. You can find that over www.samuraiguitartheory.com. Thank you all for watching. If you want to get caught up in the series where I try out of the ordinary guitars, you can hit that link up there. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for regular musical content. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a comment and hitting that like button. Until next time, I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I will see you again soon.
Namaste.
Namaste. There. That was what we're looking for.
That's how he
Samurai
gets those
guitars.
nice charts, though. He got a pro for his animations.
Yeah, that works. Definitely one way to do it for sure. And I like it.
And
Very,
I can't believe it. They're still getting $300 for that thing. I mean, it was expensive back in the 80s, real expensive, but that's still getting a premium for 2023.
Now, Mr. Jacob says no sound, but I think he just needs to refresh. Do you hear me now, Jason? He just
If
says
you
super
yell
low
loud
volume.
enough, he might hear you.
Hey, Jason. I think he's over that way. But he's really far over that way. Quite far, in fact. But yes, Samurai Guitarist there. And a very cool little thing. Like you said, more of a toy. It reminds me of one, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a small, essentially the one I had was more of a toy guitar, and it was, $20 or whatever it was. Same idea where what you were strumming were strings that were like fishing line that were slack. So there was like, they weren't tight like guitar strings would be, and they didn't sound like the note that you're supposed to hear when you strum it. But it wasn't the point. The idea was just to register that it was a strum. So you just, and as he said, Fingerstyle was the, made most sense. Still say our mics are lower, so let's go. Let me go up to 125%. Look out, 125%. What about Tony? What if we bring him up? I'm gonna bring him up to 125. Try that, Tony.
I'm at 125.
Oh yeah, maybe that's better. So yeah, I just brought up the volumes in here. We'll see how that does. Make sure we're not too loud. At the same time, how loud is the these?
Good. These sound good here.
Cool. That's it.
And they sound better than that Casio.
And in fact,
you can see why that never really took off, right?
Yeah,
Like, at that time, guitarists didn't want to sound like keyboardists, and any keyboardist that wanted to sound like a guitar didn't want their guitar to sound like a keyboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
But he
It's all
makes a
about
good
what you're trying to
point.
make.
Yeah, he makes a good point that, like, if you were serious about getting a MIDI guitar these days, the best choice would be a MIDI pickup. If I was going to try to get a MIDI guitar now, I'd want to get pickups in the guitar, and that's where you're going to get the lowest latency and the best performance.
And that's the other question, is what you're trying to accomplish as far as the music you're trying to put down. If you're trying to do guitar parts, if you're more comfortable playing keyboard than guitar, you might want to do the keyboard with the guitar sounds and have the really good sounds for that. But the same, to really get guitar inflections, let's say, like the bends and all those types of things, the bends, the slides, all of that kind of technique, we'll say, you really do need a guitar or a guitar style controller in order to get those kinds of things working. You see them do it on keyboards, or they try to do it with, Aftertouch and with Mod Wheel and all that kind of thing. You can try to get some of that happening, but you really do need a stringed instrument, I think, to get the real flavor of, guitar.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, those had like plastic strings. It was like nylon.
Yeah. Yep. And that was the thing, the little toy, whatever it was that I had, same thing. It was just short little strings that only the strumming part is where the strings were. And the fretboard was actually just buttons. So it would be, you hit this string and it was just a big button, like, third fret was just a whole third fret, but whichever string you strummed would then sound on the third fret. So you didn't have to get really accurate with where you were fretting notes, but you needed to be on the correct fret. So it was more Guitar Hero style, where you're just hitting the correct, hit the right button, the red one, and then strum on the third string or whatever.
Take the
So it's very
reds,
simplified.
man.
Yeah, yeah. But I can see how it would also, if somebody got used to playing that, it would, lend towards being able to play a guitar later. It did have that same, same playing technique, at least to get you started. Like at least, or recognize that this note is on this fret and then moving up one gives you this sound. And, as you're making those associations, it would get easier over time to even just play, regular guitar
Yeah,
from using a
hey,
controller like that.
Slither Joe in the house, and
Oh, Slither,
Roland. He mentions
Slither and
Roland.
Jason and Uni, everybody hanging out.
Roland did have a MIDI guitar as well
Mhm.
at one point.
Now, I would imagine would that be with better sounds as well? Because I mean, like you said, the sounds in that particular one were pretty basic, and even the Casio keyboard, the pretty basic Casio keyboard that I have, as you mentioned, has even better sounds. It's just electric piano, but I mean, it's a pretty decent sound compared to what we heard in the guitar there. But again, it also depends on what sound you're looking for. It was a very retro sound going on.
Well, and another thing to consider is that thing does have MIDI outs. So
Yeah.
if you wanted to do the MIDI, but you didn't like the sounds that it comes with, the MIDI out will go to any synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
the beauty of MIDI.
Hey, what's happening tonight? Everybody hanging out today. Now we did that was like the intro to guitar night. Started with the Franken guitar, or the the monster guitar from Samurai there. Then we had a couple of others that were for intonation and checking your setup and things like that. So I'm not sure where we wanted to go next. We can go to a couple different things. What are you feeling, Tom?
Intonation one is a good one. It's a good topic.
Yep, yep. Now the intonation one was also referenced from within the setup one, so it doesn't matter which order we do them in. But those are both short. They're about 4 minutes each, but give you an idea of how to set the intonation on an electric guitar. In this case, it's a Strat style guitar. But just some very basic stuff, but it's good stuff to check, and it's stuff that even on an instrument that's been playing well, that that I might not have had set up professionally for a year or so, I would still go back and look and realize, hey, maybe I do need to adjust the truss rod a little bit, or maybe I do need to recheck the saddles and make sure the intonation is just right, because it really, having an instrument that is perfectly intonated is so key, because just everything sounds so good. Like if you're playing a chord high up on the neck, it rings true and it sounds the way it's supposed to. Whereas if your intonation is out, some of the notes will be sharp or flat, and just the whole thing doesn't sound quite right, and it's not as rewarding to play.
Now, when you buy a new guitar, like say at Guitar Center,
Mhm.
you'd want to intonate it, or would you trust them to have already intonated it?
It's kind of a question on what range guitar we're talking about. If it was a bottom of the line $100-$200 like just base model or something, I would assume it's not set up well and that it needs to be looked at. But that's the kind of thing that I would look at myself, and these videos will show us exactly the kind of things we need to look at. One of the big ones, let me trade here for a second. One of the big ones was where the individual saddles are placed, and that can be a big thing for how things are set. I will go to this. And let me swap in over here. There you go. Because if I go to look at a guitar that's brand new and the individual saddles across here, individual saddles across here are all dead even going across, it looks pretty that way. It means the intonation is definitely wrong, because the intonation usually, like if you saw where these are all placed, like one's a little bit further forward, one's a little further back, and that's a matter of going with the tuner and carefully checking each string to see that they're all in the appropriate position, where the open string and then the fretted note at the 12th fret are both perfectly in tune with a good tuner, a tuner that is very accurate. And that's why he'll show with a couple of different tuners how you'll see it. But you'll see that if it's perfectly in tune open, and then when you go to check at the 12th fret, it's sharp, then it's showing you which way you need to move the saddle at the back. But he'll go over that real quick. But definitely useful information. And that site was
That is
Philip
Philip McKnight on YouTube.
Yep. And again, these are just a couple of short little, like I think it's 4 minutes each, one on intonation and one on the general setup process itself. The intonation is like a subset of that general setup process, but we can start with either one, doesn't matter. And again, it's very good information. It's quick stuff, but it's stuff to be able to check on any instrument, whether it's a brand new one like we were just talking about, or whether it's one that I'm just picking up that somebody says, hey, I just got this new guitar from a buddy of mine, check this out. And as soon as I pick it up, one of the first things I'll do is see, go to tune it and see how it is open, and then fretting the 12th fret and see what kind of adjustments need to be done. Because I did that for Pepe's guitar, because one of the strings needed to be moved, you know, not an eighth of an inch maybe, but just that little difference made such a difference to the way it sounds, because he's doing a lot of Santana stuff. He's playing further higher up the neck, and for the intonation to be up there makes a big difference.
Yeah, bit more important.
Mm-hmm. So Philip McKnight on intonating and setting up guitars.
Today, we're going to show you how to intonate a guitar from scratch. To do this, you're going to need a couple of things. First, a tuner. I'm using a Peterson strobe tuner. However, a quality floor tuner would work great, like a Boss pedal, or you can use a snark. Keep in mind, for the basics of this video, any tuner will work fine. You're going to need a measuring tape. This is important. You're going to need a screwdriver, a Phillips, or a flathead, depending on the style of guitar you have. Side note, I like to do my setups and intonation holding the guitar in the playing position. However, it's impossible to do videos like that. Don't let anybody ever tell you there's only one way to do something. You can experiment with using it on the bench or in the playing position. It's up to you. Step 1. What if you get a guitar, doesn't have strings, you have no idea where the saddles are supposed to be set? Where do you just start? And it's super easy. This guitar is a Fender guitar, or a Squire to be more accurate, is 25.5-inch scale. What that means is the first saddle, the low E, go ahead and measure from the inside of the nut, right here, to the tip of that saddle, or really where the string breaks off the end of that saddle, and it's exactly 25.5 inches. If you were a Paul Reed Smith, you'd be at 25 inches, or a Gibson, you would be at 24.75. And of course, there's all kinds of variations, so check the specifications on your guitar. Let's go to step 2. All we're going to do is start with the low E string and tune it up so that the tuner says that it's perfectly in tune. And then we're ready for step 3. Go ahead and press down on the 12th fret and pluck the string the same way you did before, plucking it. And you'll notice in this case, the guitar is sharp. Now, if it's sharp, there's 2 easy ways to remember what to do. If you're looking at a tuner like this, if you hit it and it's sharp, you'll notice it's pointing this way. All of them, all 3 tuners are pointing this way. Then you would push the saddle that way. If you were flat and the tuners were moving this direction, then bring the saddle towards the nut. When the note is flat, go towards the headstock. It's easy to remember because the headstock is flat surface. So if you're flat, go to the headstock. The bridge is a sharp surface. So if you're sharp, bring the saddle towards the bridge or the back of the guitar. So in this case, what we'll do, go ahead and hit that E again, make sure we're still there. Pluck the E, which is now going to say we're sharp, which means we'll bring the saddle back, loosen the string just a little bit. Once the string is loosened, go ahead and make an adjustment. Now, you want to go in small adjustments depending on how extreme. If you're very sharp, don't feel bad if you just want to take a couple turns at it like I am right now. Go ahead and tune it back up. Go ahead and same force, pluck that. And you can see it's less sharp than it was before. Repeat the process. Loosen the string. Go ahead and bring the saddle back just a little bit. And keep in mind, we're moving in increments of like 0.5 millimeter at a time. So now we'll tune the string back up to pitch and then check it on the 12th fret. And there we are, we're perfectly intonated. And now we'll just repeat the process for the other 5 strings. This is important. Let's say you're following my rules and the note is sharp and you're bringing the saddle towards the back of the guitar, and it's getting sharper and sharper. It's not fixing itself. At that point, the best thing to do is stop what you're doing, go ahead and measure again and put yourself back to that exact scale length of the correct scale length of the guitar again and start from 0. Sometimes the rules are different because of the angles, the height of the strings. So it's important that you understand that if you're having that problem, don't feel bad, just start from scratch. Well, there you go. That's how you intonate your guitar. Keep in mind, this channel is supported by you guys. So if you give us a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, check out the merch store, or become a patron. All of those things help this channel continue to grow. And I thank you for that. And until next time, know your gear.
Oh, I like
I would
his
recommend
slogan.
keeping the fireworks away from the gas-powered guitar. That would be bad.
I like his slogan, know your gear.
Mm-hmm. Know your gear, absolutely. And I liked also the other principle that you had in there, which was don't let anybody tell you that there's one right answer. Doing the setup in the playing position, for example, I hadn't really considered that. I don't know that it makes a big difference, but I never tried it, so I can't say. But I will, absolutely agree that the intonation is very important. And I've seen it change guitars that people were like, yeah, I don't know. They were just kind of, wishy-washy about even playing it. And then after we did the intonation, they were just like, wow, it feels and sounds so good when they play it now. As long as you tune up, that's the other key, tune up when you're going to start playing it. Even if you're only going to play for a few minutes, double check that tuning because it's important. If it sounds right, that's where you get the best results out of it. And that'll make it, make you more likely to want to play more.
And good job, Philip. You got Glenn wanting to try something.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got another video, about the same length, and it's actually kind of the one that was the parent video to this one. This is the intonation one. The other one is about the different things to look at when you're doing a setup, which includes things like the truss rod adjustment, the intonation, all of that stuff. So there's a few
What's the
different
name on that one?
That one is actually the first one in our list down at the bottom here, how to do a fast and great guitar setup.
Ah, yeah. This was the one we were going to open up with, actually.
Yep. Yeah. And again, it doesn't matter which order we do them in, but this one is going to reference it. He's going to mention when he talks about intonation that he has a separate video on intonation. And that's the one we just watched.
So we're already ready.
We're already ready. We did our homework ahead of time. Good stuff, though. And this is more, again, similar things, but things to look at when in this case, seeing if you do need a truss rod adjustment. And this explains what types of things you'd be looking for, which is also important because this can also affect the intonation. It can also affect the playability. If you're having buzz on certain notes, if your action is too high in some places, but not in others, these are things that definitely would impact those different factors.
And it helps you to get comfortable with your instrument so you don't need a guitar tech as often.
Yes. And, there's nothing wrong, not trying to put guitar techs out of business. A professional setup is still something I go and do every couple of years, especially if I have a really important gig coming up. But for the most part, I know how to do all the different things and I understand the different things that I would be looking for. So I can also do the setup myself. So I can just make sure I keep an eye on it and don't let things get too far out of spec so that even if I did bring it in for a setup, they'd be like, yeah, we didn't have to do much. They just clean this, did that, restring everything else. They double check everything, but they don't have to make massive adjustments because the guitar hasn't gotten so far out of whack over time because I keep an eye on things. It's good stuff. Now I think I'll go ahead and start this one off for us and then we'll jump in again right afterwards. How to do a fast and great guitar setup from Philip McKnight's channel.
Today, I wanted to make a quick reference guide on the proper order in which you should make adjustments to your guitar when doing a setup. Now, before I get started, if you learned something at any point in this video or you enjoy yourself, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and it helps me know to keep making content like this. So the method we're going to use is called train. This system was shown to me by Principal Master Builder Ron Thorne.
As far as the order of how to adjust things, train.
Now it's important to note that we're going to make all the adjustments to this guitar in the sitting position. This is not a full setup. This is just how to make the guitar more playable and enjoyable for you. First, we're going to tune the guitar. This can be done with a floor tuner or a clip-on tuner on your headstock. Once we tune the guitar, then we're going to adjust the relief. So how do we do that? Well, we would make an adjustment to the truss rod. How to tell if we need relief? Well, what you want to do is press down on the low E string first, press down with your first finger on the first fret, using your thumb on your right hand, put it on the last fret of the guitar, and then use your finger to tap on the 12th fret. If the string is laying on the fretboard, that means that the truss rod is too tight and we're going to need some relief. That we would do by adjusting the truss rod by loosening it. In almost every case, it's going to be counterclockwise. If your action is still very high and you find yourself tapping down on the 12th fret and it's really, really noticeable that you have high action, this is the time where you'd want to tighten the truss rod just to straighten out the neck to make sure that the action comes into play. Keep in mind that no matter whether or not it's too low or too high doesn't matter as long as it's not buzzing and it suits your ears and the way you play. Now it's time for A. Action is going to be adjusted by your bridge. Whether you have a Gibson or Fender style guitar or even an acoustic guitar, this is going to be adjusted by lowering or raising the bridge. Now an acoustic, that's a different story. You would have to shim the bridge up or sand the bridge down. But on an electric guitar, you're just going to make a quick adjustment using either an Allen wrench or a flathead screwdriver. Now that you have the guitar playing a little better, you're going to realize that the intonation's a little out. And intonation, if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link right here that shows you how to adjust that and why that's important. But more importantly, you would adjust it by turning the screws on the bridge either to move the saddles towards the nut or away from the nut. And again, there's a video reference for that if you don't know what intonation is. Now last, Ron says in is for noodle, which is to play and enjoy it, but I'm gonna go ahead and change that to nut. This is a good time to inspect the nut on the guitar. I like to do it with my ring finger on my left hand. I push down on the 3rd fret using my pointer finger to push down on the 1st fret. And what I want to see is either no gap or just a very slight small gap. In other words, when you're pushing on the string, it's almost like immediately touches that fret. Now, if it touches the fret already when you push down on the 3rd fret and you're getting no buzz and no issues with playing, it's fine. And if it sounds right and it's not buzzing and you have push a little bit, again, that's fine. But if you notice a gap between the 1st fret and your string, when you're pushing down on the 3rd fret on all 6 strings, it means that the slots on the nut are not cut correctly, and it might be something you want to address by cutting the slots properly and letting those strings line up correctly. Just a quick note, you shouldn't make any adjustments to the nut unless you're sure the relief and the action is set correctly on the neck. The easy part about this is there's a couple ways that you can do setups, but this is a great system to remember. So if you do this and the guitar is still not playing the way you want, well, you just repeat the process. You would tune the guitar, adjust the relief, set the action, set the intonation, and then check the nut, or just play again and make sure it's fine. Either way, just repeat this process. This is the order in which you can do setups. It's a fast, easy way. And again, I want to thank Ron for giving us such a great acronym. It's a great way to remember the order in which you should make adjustments to your guitar. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for your time. Till the next time, know your gear.
And remember, only
good
check your
guitar
own
channel.
ones.
Unless you trust your guitar technician.
Or at least get permission before you check other ones. But yes, it is important. The nut is one of those things that a lot of people do overlook when it comes to the guitar setup. But those are all important factors, and all of them can help a lot and can turn an instrument that seems mediocre, or somebody never really liked it, or they didn't like how it played, or they didn't like how it felt when they played it. All of these things can make the instrument work for them. And it's not that there is a perfect right answer. Some people are shredders and they want the action very, very, very low so that they have to barely strings in order to get the note to sound. Other people want high action so that they have to really push down so that notes don't sound by accident, and they really have to intentionally push down. So it's what works for you, and it comes to getting used to your gear, know your gear, and figure out what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your stuff and what feels
and
like
literally train yourself. I
Yeah,
like that
exactly. I like that too.
analogy.
Yeah, good acronym that they chose there for that.
Yeah, he's slick. We like that, Philip.
So-
You are a guitar guy.
And Knight says, settle down, Beavis. Now, we had a couple of others tonight for the guitar-ish evening that we've got going on. A couple of them I see. Let's see. We had the Unlocking the Guitar Playing Forever. And we also have those are the Grateful Dead ones. Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah,
Unlocking Forever.
Ricky's. Yeah, I'm wondering what he's like. I haven't had a chance to see this one.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And like I said,
I'm
this is one
wondering
he's
where
going
he's
to talk
gonna
about.
go
I want
with
to say it's the L7, but it's basically about the shape of if you were to hold the guitar neck vertically and you're looking at the chords 1, 4, 5 and the chords 2, 3, 6, they make shapes that look like an L and a 7, and it makes it easier to kind of visualize where those chords are on the neck relative to each other. So it helps to be able to, whatever key, if you can find the root note, you can find the root note, and then you say, oh, this is the root note, this is the 1, then you know already, here's the 1, the 4, and the 5 that are major, and here's the 2, the 3, and the 6 that are minor, most likely. And then once you got it, you go from there. One of the fast ways to get into a song if you're trying to figure it out.
No nonsense guitar lessons at Ricky's Guitar on YouTube.
Nice. Good stuff.
Where is he? Where are you,
Second
Ricky? Here we go.
Get your head around this and it will help you unlock all those chords that you need to play the songs that you love. Hey guys, there's a lot to pack into this lesson, and as you can see, I've already got started. If you've already seen some of my other videos before, then you may already know what the L7 grid is, but in case you haven't, I'm going to go over it again. But I'm going to use this to show you a second grid. If you remember, I told you there were 4 grids, and this is the second grid that I'm about to show you. To give it context, I need to show you this one first. Now this is a continuation of the last lesson where I talked about where the minor key comes from, and we're going to roll that into this one as well. As you can see, this is the major L7 grid. Now what do we mean by the L7 grid? What we should always be trying to do is turn anything that is music theory and applying it to the guitar. We know in the major key that we have 3 major chords and 3 minor chords, and those can be broken down to this pattern here, this L7 grid. The red bracket that you can see, that is the major chords, and let me just demonstrate that on the guitar. We get 1, 4 and 5 there. Now that is the 7 part of the L7. So chord 1, because it is on the E string, means that this is going to be an E shape, and that would mean I would play an E shaped major chord like this. When we jump down onto the 4 on that L7 grid, you can see that we're on the A string. That would mean we will play an A major shape. We can also then use this A major shape and go up that grid to the chord 5. And there is chord 5. So if we put those 3 together, we get those 3 positions there can become blues, rock and roll, punk. There's lots of use cases of this, and it's sometimes called the 3-chord trick. But if we want more colour, what we need to do is bring some minors in here for contrast. Majors are happy, minors are sad, so that is the contrast that we're looking for. Well, let's take that and create that contrast. So if we go through the blue grid now, we go here at the 7th fret, we're on the B. You can see we're on the B there. Then we get to the C sharp here, or the D flat. It says D flat on that grid there because I'm thinking of that line of letters as being tonic notes for 12 different keys. But in the key of A, it's going to be called C sharp. Let's apply the chord to it, which gives us a C sharp minor. So there we go, we've got the C sharp minor. That takes care of chord 3. We jump over to chord 6, which is on the A string, which means it's an A shape, but we have to modify the shape to be a minor, and that gives us an F sharp minor. And in the end, what we get there are the 6 chords that we need for the key of A major. I've left out the diminished because we don't need those. We can apply those later if we're playing jazz or classical music, because frankly it doesn't really come up that often in popular music. So tying into the lesson that I talked about where the minor comes from and how we derive it from the major, we can do a similar thing with the L7 grid. The same chords exist for each key. We get the same chords for both the major and the minor key. They are just in a different order. And if you haven't seen that video, watch the video in the end card, and you may have to come back to this video again, but that's okay. So what I've done here is I've changed it so that the chords are the same. The chords haven't changed, but the Roman numeral chord name for the chords has changed. And that's really important that we use these Roman numerals. We can actually think of them as Nashville chord numbering system as well. So what we have to do is we have to flip it around. We have to think of this as being chords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the minor key. Let me just play them in order. We've got chord 1. Chord 2 would be a diminished chord, but we're not playing it. Chord 3 is here. Chord 4 is here. Chord 5 is here. Chord flat 6 is here, and that is a major chord. Up a whole step, we get the flat 7 major. Up a step, we get back to chord 1. So you can see that this becomes interchangeable with the major and the minor key. They are just taking on different names because they are in different positions in the order that they come in. When we think in major, we get a major chord 1, and as you can see in this, we get a minor chord 1. Now what I've done is I've taken that minor part of that L7 grid and I've thrown it an octave lower. Remember, we had F sharp minor here, we had C sharp minor here, and then we had B minor here. And what we've done is we've gone to the 2nd fret, we've just moved it all down. So we need to play a minor shape down here. Because this is the E string, then this F sharp here is going to be the root note of that chord, but we're going to play an E minor shape for that chord. So we get an F sharp minor, which is what we had up here. Let's compare the two. What we can also do is we can move that across. That's minor. This is the B minor again. Instead of this voicing, we have this voicing. And then I can move this up to C sharp minor here. And then I can play it here as well. There's two places to be able to play those minor chords. And this is super convenient because what we can do is we can move in between these to access all the voices that the guitar has to offer, because the way I think of the guitar as being a choir, it has 4 different voices, and what you need to be able to do is to be able to exploit those voices to communicate what it is that you're trying to say musically. So if I get rid of this minor bracket that I had, then we're just left with this new grid, and I said there are 4 grids, and this is the second grid that you need to learn. This is what I call the 7-7 grid, because as you can see, it looks like a 7 and a 7 standing on top of each other. This means we have a different way of looking at the minor. So we can just see the 7-7 grid as being the default for the minor if you wanted to think of it that way. Although in a moment I'm going to show you how these join up. So we've got this chord 1, chord 4, chord 5. That means we can find the 1, 4, 5 for a minor key very, very easily. But also to boot, by adding that extra 7, which is in the red bracket, we can find the major chords of that minor key. So here are those major chords. This becomes a really useful thing when we want to find out where chord 5 is, maybe turn that into a major, because that's what we would do if we were trying to do something in harmonic minor. Listen to this. I just substituted the chord 5 in that minor there for a major 5 instead, and that is really cool to be able to just figure that out on the guitar really, really easily. So that's a golden nugget. We have minor 1, minor 4, minor 5. We get the minor 3, which is a flat 3, the minor 6, which is a flat 6 chord, and the minor 7, which is a flat 7 chord. The reason we want to put flats in the names of these Roman numeral chords is because we are retaining the scale degrees of the minor scale, because that flat 3 that it says major on there, that is the flattened third of that scale. And that flat 6 is the flat 6th of the scale, the formula for a minor scale, and that's the flat 7. So that's why we use this. And of course we can always flip this around, so if we're thinking in major and we're playing mostly in chords 1, 4 and 5, and we want to know where chords 2, 3 and 6 are, then we know they're going to be here in a lower voiced position, because that suits the song. Knowing all this means that you can find these common chord progressions. Let's look at something like a 6, 2, 5, 1. All I need to do is follow the grid. Look, 6, chord 2 is just underneath it, chord 5 is up here, and then chord 1 is here. You may recognize that progression because that's Ave Maria and Island in the Sun by Weezer. So it's useful to remember your chords as Roman numerals, as well as understanding them from their alphabet letter chord names. Now, because I can move that L-shaped bracket down to become a 7-shaped bracket from here to here, that means I can expand my chord vocabulary all the way pretty much up the neck. Let's have a go through it. Here is chord 6. Here's chord 2. Here's chord 3. Here's chord 1. Here's chord 4. Here's chord 5. Here's chord 2. Here's chord 3. Here's chord 6. So knowing these L7 and 7/7 patterns is only half the battle. To make sure you really get it, you have to understand where the minor key comes from. And you can learn that by watching this video here.
Yeah, more good info
Good
there.
stuff. Good stuff.
I really do like the visualization like that. 1, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 6. And once you realize that they just repeat over and over everywhere else on the neck, you know, everything is really just right there. And you know, it's not, you know, not millions of it's all over the neck that you have to worry about. Just worry about the one, you know, you find the root note of where the song is that you're in, and you figure out the relationships to get everything else happening.
And I saw the
And
L7.
talk about major and minor stuff later. Yeah, the L and the 7. Nice visual stuff. That helps a lot as well to help to remind people how it works.
And I like
And the
that he
repeating of the 7.
emphasized that, you know, start thinking in Roman numerals, because once I
Yes.
understood the Roman numeral approach, music made a lot more sense.
Yep. And in it is more often seen in keyboards where people get stuck playing in only a couple of keys, only playing C major and A minor, maybe G major, maybe D major, but they kind of avoid some of the quote unquote complicated keys where there's a lot of sharps or a lot of flats, whereas it's not really relevant because you can just move up a fret and play the same thing that you just played, and it's the same thing, but now instead of C, it's in C sharp, it's D or whatever. Transposing on the guitar is very easy. Just on the keyboard, you have to mess with all the sharps and flats. So I get that a lot of people, it's a little bit different when they're dealing with keyboards in terms of, you know, not necessarily being comfortable playing.
Oh, you got to claw through a
But it comes with
keyboard
time.
like all over the place.
Yeah. But we still have a couple other guitar things for tonight. I think we have a guitar EQ video over here, and we also have some noodling ones where we're actually going to listen to a little bit of a jam track going through and just ideas of how to work with a jam track, which are kind of fun. We'll check those out in a minute.
Yeah, and this EQ one is music surgery.
Yes, exactly.
What he talks about here is how to get nice sounding loud guitars. You know, with some good EQ, you know, guitars are supposed to sound loud.
Exactly. Let's see how we make that work.
And he's a new find for us too. This is Bobby Huff at Bobby Huff at YouTube.
Nice. And yes, Uni makes it much easier to transpose because, you know, the 1 is the 1, the 4 is the 4, and whatever key you want to do it in. If you want to drop it to, you know, drop it down because the singer's voice is a little sore today or whatever, you can make changes like that on the fly without everybody having to reimagine how the song goes in their head. Unless they're a keyboard player where they do have to do that, or use the transpose button to just transpose down or whatever.
And this is why this video caught my eye. He used Eddie for the thumbnail.
Yeah, nice.
It's like, okay, you're gonna talk about Eddie sound? I'm all ears.
Good choice. You needed his homework
Loud
ahead of time.
guitars that don't hurt your ears.
Let's do it.
How to get loud guitars without hurting your ears. Next on Music Surgery with me, Dr. Bob. Hey you guys, quickly before we get started, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. And don't forget to check out the Doctor's Lounge, my store, and the links to some great samples below in the description of this video. We've all heard Eddie Van Halen's beautiful brown sound, possibly the greatest rock guitar tone ever. But you ever notice how you can crank up a Van Halen song super loud and it doesn't hurt your ears? Well, most rock songs do. Here's the secret. All right, you guys, let me play you these guitars. This is really next level stuff. We're really looking for the small little details that make such a big difference. And these are the things that the next level guys and girls that mix really look for that seem to elude us. But here's one of them. Let me play you these dirty guitars. These were well recorded, and there's nothing on these. They're just panned right now. So check these out.
Now let me play you the same thing with everything else in, but no vocal. Okay, so good sounding guitars. What everyone will tell you to do in a mix to really get that bite, to get the energy, is to go to the 1, 2, 3, 4K range and really find that energy spot. So let's find this. I'm going to play the guitars. So there it is, right around 2K if I take it out. So that's what is accentuated when I solo this. Now let me sweep this around and you can hear the mid-range where a lot of people think this energy comes from. Starts to go away there. Starts to get fizzy up there. So let me play this in the track now. So there, around there, is the typical place that you would boost for that excitable, distorted guitars, hard pan guitar thing. But that's the very thing that's killing your ears and making it hard to turn up. Well, listening to records that David Bendeth and Dan Corneff mix, especially listen to Misery Business by Paramore. Now that song gets all the accolades for the snare drum. It just won some poll as the greatest snare drum ever recorded, and the snare drum is phenomenal. I did a thing a few weeks ago and kind of recreated that snare drum. I'll put a link right here, and you can download. There's 6 or 8 different snare drums that made that drum up. I'll put a link there. You can download the parts to kind of replicate that snare. But what people don't realize is not only is that snare drum so great, but things are out of the way of that snare drum to make it that good. And that's not a diss. That's an extra compliment to David Bendeth and Dan Corneff. So here is what I find when you really get to the next level guys or females, whatever, who's ever really detailing here. There's another frequency range that you can find energy in with these guitars that's lower. And in these guitars, I've found it around 577 hertz. And I've dipped around 2K where it hurts. This is some of the reason why Eddie Van Halen... Now, I'm not emulating the Brown sound here. That's a tone thing and everything. But in his tone, it never hurt. I mean, you crank up Unchained or Panama, you can crank that as loud as you want and it doesn't hurt your ears. Something about that sound, that tone, gets the energy below where it hurts your ears. So this is where I've found these guitars to live with a different energy, a different excitement that doesn't hurt your ears. So let me play you the guitars. I've turned the last EQ off, so these are our normal guitars now. Now let me turn this EQ on so you can hear the different energy and where it's placed. Again before. With. The tone almost sounds more brown. Now, I'm not the brown sound that Eddie has, but it's warmer, but still excitable. I'll put this up. You can take a look at this if you want to copy it. I mean, every guitar, dirty guitar sound is different, but this is what I've done for these guitars. There's a 5.5 dB boost at 577 and a cut, 2.5 dB cut at 2700. So let me play them. Let me solo them. With it off. With it on. With it off again. And with the other EQ that enhances the 2K range. You turn that up, it's going to hurt your ears. So if I turn our old one back, our new brown sound one on, I can almost turn it up. The other thing this does so magically is it gets those guitars completely out of the vocal range. And, you know, obviously I can go in here and mess with how much I've turned it up. So there you go, a whole new excitable frequency range for dirty guitars. Try cutting in, sweep this range for what's hurting your ears. Like this. And then sweep this range for the power around 500. I mean, I know a lot of people hate 400, but this is above that. That actually might even be better. Around 600 at plus 3.5 and 2100 minus 2.5. Now, obviously, that's for these tones. But take a look at that and try this on your next rock song. This is going to get it out of the way of the vocal, and this is going to add some power in this frequency range. The top of your snare is going to be up here. The bottom of your snare should be down around 100. So this mid-range is really going to be great for rock. We play it one more time. Magic, so much power, but doesn't hurt your ears.
Well, there you go. An entirely different powerful frequency range for rock guitar that doesn't bite your head off. Find this hidden treasure in your mix and turn it up loud. Thanks as always for watching. Give me some comment love and a thumbs up below, and hit me at drbobmusicsurgery@gmail.com if you want to say hello or you want me to work on your music. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you the next time the doctor's in.
Like this channel.
Very cool. Good stuff. It
Yeah,
also
well,
reminded me of. Good.
well, he's not bullshitting about musical surgery. He is like a EQ surgeon there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminded me of the discussion we had about singers and formants and the harmonics going above that. So like he was talking about 2400 being the top end there with the painful stuff, and the 600 being the bottom end. And that made sense because 24, you cut it in half, you're at 1200, cut it in half again, you're at 600. So they are, related frequencies very much so. So cutting that top end to cut the sizzle or to cut where it would be painful if you're trying to push it, and then boosting the subharmonics essentially, or the lower, the formant, let's say, for that particular sound. I like it. Very cool.
Yeah, and the more you start to understand these frequencies and how they relate, the better your EQing gets.
Yeah, exactly. And the more you're hearing all the mix and all, yeah.
I really dig that Fab Filter Pro Q. Have you not noticed, like, a lot of these guys love that Fab Filter EQ? Knight was mentioning, he uses Logic in the EQ. That the good thing about what you saw there is it applies no matter which EQ you're using. It's all about implementation. And
yep. But if you do look at the approach that he's using is important, because being able to see the real-time analysis is important to see which areas are boosted the most, and then you can really just pinpoint exactly what he's looking for by the harmonic sequence. Exactly, Uni. By soloing that particular section and then going back and forth, you hear the it's like you're tuning an old radio, right? But the idea is that you're listening for where you're getting the most energy out of it to see whether, this is bad energy that you need to pull out, or if this is where the energy boost needs to go to fill in or replace where that energy was. Very good.
And that really is what some of that like sound that's going on in the background is. It is the energy, or sometimes it's the noise. It's the thing that's giving you pain.
Yep. And understanding that the Q is the, how wide you're pulling. Like if you pull, one frequency down into a super narrow, super low Q, that's super tight pull, or if you have it as super wide and you're trying to bring the whole area down, there's definitely different things that'll happen in each situation. How much are you trying to pull out of the whole thing versus just that one point? If you're trying to fight feedback, for example, you'd be trying to pull a very, very narrow frequency. You're like just that one frequency and you pull it way down, and then you don't have to worry about that. But the other sounds that are in that neighborhood aren't getting drastically altered because most of the frequency spectrum is still there. You're only pulling out that one painful spot that's causing the spike.
Yeah, and that Pro Q really does make it look easy, huh?
Yeah.
So that's at Bobby Huff over on YouTube, and he cuts diagnoses and remedies stuff about music, not just guitars either. So I will be visiting this channel.
And that's a good point there as well. Is about the full mix and hear everything, because you can EQ each channel individually. Like each channel does deserve its own treatment. Like you want to listen to each one, get the level right, get the effects right, get everything going fine, and then it's all about how they all fit together. So if the mix is too muddy in a particular area, it's not necessarily about we have to cut that one instrument or bring it down. You just figure out how to carve the right frequency ranges to get each instrument to shine in the range that makes sense for that instrument type.
Yeah, and if you are dealing with muddiness, that's his third video here. Lose the mud and get more detail.
Exactly. More clarity.
Which is another discussion we'll have one night.
Yeah.
The mud is something, when it comes to mixing, it's a real thing.
And one thing that you might find is it might be a very similar approach to what we just talked about, but flipped around the other way, where you might say, not the 600, but maybe 300 is where there's room hum down there that's too much. So you're trying to pull out at 300 and boost a little at 600, maybe to try to get that overtone, to let the sound be represented while, to balance out for what you pulled out to stop the room hum. You never know. That could be part of what's going on there. It is one of the techniques that you can use for that. I like it though. Yeah, that's a good find, or a new find for me too. Bobby Huff, Dr. Bob.
Yes.
Dr. Bob.
Welcome to our subscription list, Bobby.
Welcome to the family.
Damn it, Bobby. So now, after you've intonated your guitar, you've EQ'd it, and you're ready to jam,
and you learn something about
We got
chords.
a couple of. We're gonna use those chords in jam.
Yeah, this one everybody should grab an instrument, whether or just sing. That's fine too. These are a couple of Grateful Dead songs that we're going to be getting into. He's going to be talking about using guide tones, which I love. This is basically getting into. It could be as easy as just the root, the third, and the fifth of whichever chord we're using now, and whichever chord we're about to be using in a minute. Those are things that are important. Knowing the structure of the song, knowing we're playing an A, and then here comes a D or whatever key. I'm not sure what key we're doing this in. But the idea is focusing on guide tones, and all of that is very important for the soloing, and gotta love the style of jam band, and these are a couple of great songs to play around with. So one of these is Bertha, and I don't recall what the other is, but we'll see momentarily.
And Jeff is a jammer.
Scarlet. There you go.
So this is at Jeff Williams Guitar on YouTube.
Yes, and we visited before, and we will visit again.
Oh yeah. One of us is a deadhead,
Yes,
and the other one's in training.
At least one of us.
I bet you I've been to more shows, though.
Ooh, I'll take that bet. But you probably win. I'll take it anyway.
It'd be a close battle.
Yeah. If we had Dead and Fish shows, probably not. But
So we'll be using guide tones with Bertha.
Nice.
So what's up? How you doing today? We're going to take a look at using guide tones with Bertha as the just song example, just kind of like a vehicle for doing this. And if you're wondering, I don't know what guide tones are, just click on this because, well, I want to know, or maybe I've heard the term, but I don't know what it is. It is basically playing specific chord tones along with a chord progression and making that the guide for your improvisation, which can go all around it. So if you see my videos a lot, you know I like to just play examples along with backing tracks to show you it in a real kind of more life example rather than just playing on my own talking about it. So let's listen to the first one, and I want you to listen. I'm going to play through my guide tone version, this little melody, and then I'm going to play it again, but improvising around it, just using pentatonic scales, and then we'll get into kind of what's going on there. But hear that first time and hear it maybe second time through. Just hear that melody again, how it's glued all together. All right, let's check it out. So what I've got going on here, the first example is we're playing just C and G, right? And we're just gonna keep it real simple and just use the pentatonic, right? So C major pentatonic, and then for G, you just gotta change one note. G major pentatonic, right? And we're just gonna grab chord tones as they happen. So it's gonna either be the root, third, or fifth of the chord. That's the basic, if you don't know, the basic building blocks of the chords. And they all each have like a different relationship to the chord. The root, fits right in there. It's the name of the chord. That's the most obvious. C is C. It's the root, also the one. But think of it like a tree. It's like the roots growing up. And then the third would be like something growing up there. The third has the most tension out of these three. The most color. Lets you know it's a major or minor chord. In this case, they're both major. And then the fifth is a little more in between. And it kind of blends and it sounds a little more like the root, but with like a little more tension, a little more color to it. And then you have different notes for G. G is now the root, which actually was the fifth of C, so they can share notes. And then you have B, which is the biggest change there. That's the third, and then D is the fifth. So the biggest change between them is not G. G glues these two chords together. So you can play G the whole time. Sounds great. But that C, and then going down to B, or in this case I'm playing it over here, different string, that's going to let the listener know that like you're changing chords if you're just playing these three notes for each of the chords. So anyways, what we have here is this guide. We're playing the root, and then we're playing the fifth, going back, fifth of G, and then back to the root of C, and then we're doing the fifth of G, and then the root of G. We're doing 2 in that one there. And then that's our little guide. That's our little melody. It's guiding the rest of the kind of improvisation. So we've got this in our ears. And when you're coming up with this stuff, you want to like listen, is this something that sounds good? Think of it just like as a little bit of a melody. And does it sound good to you? It doesn't have to be something crazy. You know, it's hard to come up with something like this. It's going to be like some groundbreaking, crazy thing or something that hasn't been done before. But make sure it's something that doesn't sound kind of, I was going to say random or whatever you like. But make sure it doesn't sound bad to you. Like you like it. So it's like, to me, you know, I came up with this. I was like, okay, it sounds good. I like it. Right. It's a little cat. You can get that in your ears. You can get your ears a little bit, right? And then just improvising around it. Right? And then for each chord while you're on it or leading into it, using the pentatonic of that chord. So you got the C, you know, and then that note, you know, by definition is the note that, like I just said, changes that pentatonic and maybe hitting up other notes from that scale and that chord and things like that too. And that'll give you some guides. Let's listen to another example. We'll dive a little deeper to some more stuff with this. This one's starting off with the root as well, but in a different spot, down an octave here. And then we're doing the root of G as well, then the third of C, then the fifth of G. So this one's even simpler, really just low down. Just wanted to give an example of low. So we got that. We can get up high if we want, and then bring it down low. We also always end on a root of a chord. It sounds almost resolved when you do, but you can end it here. And we can mix and match. You know, you can think of a longer thing of like, oh, we have one time through, get this one guide, and then the next one, another one. And this is not all meant to be memorized. It can, although for exercise sake, it's great. This is mostly for exercise sake, and the hope is that eventually you start hearing this stuff in your head, and you get away from thinking. This right now, you may be thinking that this is a lot of thinking, but my goal is always to get people removed from thinking too much when you're actually playing, you know. But going through little exercises like this can take a big leap towards getting you to that spot of just hearing it more in your head and just playing and still improvising freely, but there's a structure in there, and it gives you much more of a direction, makes you much more melodic, and makes it more kind of memorable, and it forces you to play more in terms of phrases. Because if you're just thinking about the scale, you just got one scale, you're going, you can play, and you can certainly make good stuff, but you're more focused on just that one scale and just kind of playing. Here, you're focused on things that not only connect to the chord, which sound good, but forcing you to have phrases and leave a little more space too, so that you get to that spot. You know, you get these destinations along your journey. So with that said, let's listen to one more example, example 3, and see what's going on with this one. So this one's starting out here. We don't have to always, like I said, stop on a root note. We don't have to start with one either. So we're starting on the root. I'm sorry, that's the third. The third of C, and then the fifth of G, the root of C, third of G, and then down to the root of G. So resolving it. So what's kind of unique of this one? It's all descending down. Very, very simple. Really add some shape there. And you could make it one going up too. Maybe make it go up, then go down, whatever, vice versa. So that you start thinking beyond this for one time through the progression, but you're linking things up, you know. And again, you got the just sliding up to it, right? And it's like you can start to hear that in your head. And this is how a lot of my playing, what I do is I'm just hearing these things, and they're not always playing out. It just starts that you do it enough, it becomes a part of you, and you start to hear these notes, and you're playing around it, and it gives you a lot more shape. So even if it may sound like I'm playing all over the place, I'm hearing this guide, and it's guiding me here, guiding me up there, wherever, and it's a huge help. It's a huge help. It's something I'm always working at, trying to get even better at. And if this is helpful, you want to try it out with the track. I got the backing track over here. I'll put it in the description down below as well. And hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to make a lot more stuff like this. So let me know in the comments down below too if this stuff is helpful for wherever you're at and you're playing. And hopefully we'll get a lot more of these in the future. And I'll see you in another video.
Oh, I think it's very helpful. You know this song, huh, Glenn? I thought for a
I love this
moment
song.
there you were playing the music. You know this song.
I was doing a little bit of the rhythm part there, yeah, for sure. That's one where it's. I had the guitar a minute ago, but it was basically the one of the things I love about it is the fact that it's just going right through. Like, for the bass part, I would just be doing, you know, for the C, you just got the C there. You're just doing the 5 notes of the pentatonic, the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So you're doing, you. So you're just going back and forth between that C and the G, and just using those, literally those 5 notes, going back and forth between the C and the G, and you could do that all day for that part of the song, because the song is just going from that C down to that G all day. And then landing on that 3 a lot, it helps also if you're on the C. And then when you're going down to that G, landing on that, the third of the G helps sometimes. Like he was talking about, doesn't always have to land on the 1, but you can, and it's helpful. And switching around also helps. So sometimes landing on the 1 and sometimes landing on the other parts, you know, going back and forth. But that's just basically if we're just going back and forth between the C and the G. On the keyboard, it's even easier because you're just doing, you know, you just got a C going on here, and then just drop the lower 2 notes down, and you got a G. G over B technically because we're doing an inversion, but mixing it from the G. Easy to go back and forth. So both ways.
And if you're taking that landing on the 1 approach, it's like a cat. You always land on your feet.
Yeah. The one thing is, if you land on the 1 all the time like that, like I do that for a while, but then all of a sudden it starts to feel like, you know, as you're coming back to that 1, it feels too obvious, I guess would be the word. Like,
Yes, expected, and it can also push you into loops. Like when you go back to the 1, next thing you know, you're repeating yourself to the point where you can't get out of the riff.
Also depends on the style of music. I mean, some types of music, you know, being on the 1 all day is perfectly fine. You know, like you're expected to be on the 1. Like sometimes the bass is going to always be hitting the 1 on the 1, you know, at every measure. So, you know, there's going to be that chord landing there all the time. Others they leave it open more, or, you know, hit it less frequently. You know, funk, things like that. Reggae, you might have, you know, you might drop the 1 and, you know, ignore that, but then, you know, you got to be there for the 2. You got to be ready.
And the 1 is always hiding somewhere in there.
what I like especially about that is again the ease of that little part right there, because we're just literally doing C major pentatonic. Let me actually go back to the other view here for a second. With this one and this one, then it's basically, if we're just like those 5 notes right there, we're just using the E, G, and A, is that whole little line I was doing a second ago. And you go to the G, doing the same kind of. Using the G, A, B, D, and E.
Well, and like he said, the G is really the glue. The G is the glue between the 2 chords.
Right, because the G is there in both cases. I mean, the G is heavily emphasized as the 1 in the G chord, but it's also the 5 in the C chord. So it's the second most important note there as well. The third is very much an important note, because that tells you whether you're major or minor. So the root's very important. The third tells you whether it's major or minor. The 5 is kind of just always there as part of the texture of the chord, so you can drop it out easily. So a lot of times if people are playing 7 chords, they might drop the 5 out. So a C major 7, they might just leave it as, because you get all that you need for the flavor of it out of that, even without that 5 in the middle. So they'll still call it a C major 7, whether that 5's in or not. But if it was just the 1, 3, and 5, it would be a C. But you had that 7, 5 doesn't matter. But if you don't have the 3 in there, then it's ambiguous, because it could be major or minor. If you don't have the 3, you're not sure.
In that situation, the B's not an asshole.
It's not an asshole.
Works good as
hang
a
out.
7th.
We're not basing a chord on him. Same thing. If we're playing the G chord, the B's still not an asshole, because he's in that 5 chord as the 3rd. But we're not trying to build a chord out of him, because that is diminished. And that's fully diminished.
Yeah, you're kind of using it more for accent.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is the diminished is, I mean, that's the feel that it gives. So if you're looking for that somewhere, you need that tension or you need that particular sound, that's where it is. But you wouldn't normally be writing music going for that if you're just doing standard, 1, 4, 5 stuff. And that sort of thing. But that was with Bertha. We have another, if people are ready to jam a little bit more, we've got another one from Jeff Williams, which is, I believe, another guide tones, but for Scarlet Begonias.
Oh, and I bet you know this song too.
I know this song too.
So you got me beat as a deadhead. I might have been to more shows.
I've heard the songs over and over. I mean, I have a library of a lot of stuff, but also I found an app on the pad at one point that is like the Deadhead archives, where you can just go back through whatever years, and like all those, you remember all the tapers who would trade their tapes and all that, like all of those ended up in an archive, so that you can just go there on the pad and just pick a year. You'll find all the shows from that year. They're all rated, oh, here's a 5-star recording from the soundboard, blah, 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 from that particular show. So like, I know how much I love the album Europe 72 is a Grateful Dead show back. There's amazing stuff on that. That's the one that's playing in my car, I think, all the time. But so it's such good stuff from there that I just picked that era and just picked some different shows from around that time. So it was like, might not have been the show from that CD recording, but it was how they were playing at that time. And this one was a month later or a month earlier or whatever. And I was just hitting all these other shows. So just being able to hear so many different shows that I never actually went to, but I was able to appreciate just by, getting over there and being able to hear what other people have put up there.
Oh, yeah.
Deadhead
And
archive.
The collectors, when it comes to the dead, back in the 80s, my friend Mike was one of the bootleg collectors, traders.
Yeah.
He had a monster collection of tapes that he recorded and traded with others, and which is what turned into like these internet archives.
Exactly. And just, I love the fact that, so much of that is available there as well as on YouTube. I mean, on YouTube, I can just, like I did earlier today, I just went, Jerry Garcia Band mix, go. And I just listened to Jerry Band doing stuff, for hours before we started our show tonight. So I was just rocking with that, because there's so many good, especially when it was like Jerry Garcia Band with Melvin Seals on keyboard. His keyboard style is so awesome. And there's a certain songs, like one of them that keeps coming up in the YouTube algorithm for me, at least, is I think they do second that emotion, the Grateful Dead doing a cover song of Second That Emotion, but there is such nice interplay between the keys with Melvin and Jerry on the guitar, and they're having so much fun with the song. And I don't even think they were scheduled to play that night. I think it was supposed to be a Grateful Dead show, but something happened, so the Jerry Garcia band filled in that night. So it was like kind of a last minute thing where, you know, hey, we're gonna play tonight, and just boom, and it just, you know,
And
just
you're
jumped
not
right
gonna
in.
hear any complaints from the fans if oh, we got the Jerry Garcia band. Oh man,
Yeah,
not
no,
gonna happen.
it was killer. It was killer. I'll find the I'll find what date it was so that we can you know, check it out later, because that is one that if you're not familiar with the Jerry Garcia band specifically and you've only seen the Grateful Dead, that's some great stuff. And in that era especially, or just certain songs that always jump out at me. They Love Each Other is another one that I always liked, you know, anytime I can find a good version of that, because that song really jams sometimes too. Anyway, getting off track, but this is another Jeff Williams video with Scarlet Begonias to jam along. So make sure you get your guitars or your keyboards, or just sing along, or just kind of absorb what we're talking about here, because again, guide tones is key, like understanding where the chord tones are, and you'll see how so many of the solos that you've heard over time rely on this technique without even, you know, without necessarily knowing that they're relying on this technique.
Oh, you'll see these kinds of techniques used all over the place.
Right, and there's a reason for that.
Yep. So Scarlet Begonias.
What's up? How you doing today? We're going to take a look at adding guide tones to Scarlet Begonias. And if you're thinking, I don't even know what that is, it is basically taking specific chord tones of the chords as they happen and guiding our solos, our improvising around it. So it will give us a little bit more shape, give us a little bit more of a melody, and get us away from the mindless noodling that sometimes it does happen, right? But let's give a listen to an example of me playing through just the guide tones, and then I'm going to just kind of play around with the scale around it. But first, get that in your ears, and when you hear the second example, try to really hear those guide tones still going there. And as you do this more and more, listening to it, but also with your own playing, you'll get better at it, and you start to hear things in a different kind of way. So let's give it a listen, and we'll break it down, and then we'll do it with one more example. So the solo goes along the, I call it the verse and then the chorus part here. We're going along playing the root, right? So we've got all these notes here, like just in this position. We're going to keep it just in this position here, the fourth position. So fourth fret here. Keep it simple. And we've got E, B, a couple times, then E. I'm sorry, A, E, B, that kind of stuff. We'll see it as we go along, right? But no, also we're using B mixolydian as the overall scale. So that's what we're going to weave in afterwards. But for now, we're just getting the chord tones. So I just picked these out, right? So we've got the root of E right here. So here's an E. And then B, because we have all these options. If you know your chord tones, if you don't, well, I got the charts right there. You can follow along. So there you go. Then you're learning, hopefully. Right? Hopefully. So then we got the root of E, then the third of B, back to the root of E. Good to repeat yourself. But then I go up to the fifth of B. So I got above all these marked what they are in relation to the chord, so they can change, And now we're going to the third of A, back to that root of E. This goes faster. This time I go down to the fifth of B. I'm sorry, E, to a B. Same thing, repeating myself. And then ending there, which is a great spot to move around on the scale. And that's just the guide tones. That's just guiding you through. So if you have that down, you get something like that memorized. It doesn't have to be the greatest little melody, but something that's like, okay, the more you can kind of tweak it to a way that you like it, the better. But just have that in your ears, have it in your fingers, and really start with that first. Internalize it, and then start adding in things around it. Maybe not like, when it's going A, E, B real quick, but spots where you have more time, especially the very end, ending on the B chord. And if you're going to do it again, just make sure you get back to that root, and it's guiding you and shaping you there. So that said, let's try out one more example, something a little lower, see how that sounds. We're going to do the same thing, just get that guide tones in your ear, and then hear while I'm playing around with it second time that it's in there, and then we'll see what's going on. So now we're starting with a different one. It's like Choose Your Own Adventure. I love those books as a kid. And we're using the third of E, a major third, fifth of B, and repeating it again, third of E, up to the root of B. And then we're going root of A, at third again of B, E, fifth, and then root, fifth, same thing down here. And then getting real low. And now here's a good example. You can do it twice because you're playing, it's the fifth of A, but then it becomes the root of E. Obviously, this is an E, the root of E. And then to the fifth of B. So just a little different example, just trying it down lower. But we can try out so many combinations just right here. Good ways is get some blank paper, write this stuff out, and try it yourself. Learn these too, that's great. But even better, just make it your own and use the little charts that I've got showing you the chord tones. And if you want to have this, I have this stuff on Patreon. I got all my charts. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a monthly subscription thing. And I put all my charts on there, all in PDF form, so you can download them, have them on your phone, your iPad, your computer, print them out, do whatever you want with them, take notes. But this is a good one to have that for the chord tones, and then have a blank sheet where you just write out your own things and, get really familiar with the chord tones and the notes, the fretboard, if you don't know that stuff, and how it fits in with the scale, with that B Mixolydian mode, and then try different places. So really you could spend forever just working here, but then try it, up on the 7th position, up here on the 9th, all that stuff. And the next thing you know, it just gets faster and faster. You get more fluid, and your solos will have more and more shape. And I know something that people often are requesting, that they're saying that their solos don't have shape. So hopefully this helps. And if you're interested in the PDF, again, I'll put a link in the description down below to head over to Patreon. And of course, I always have a backing track. I'll put it over here. You can head over to that and try this stuff out right now if you got your guitar, and have fun with it. And I'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, for me, and even if I'm not working on,
we'll see him in the next video.
But even if I'm not working on soloing or guide tones or any of that, I would even just use these tracks just to sit there and practice the chords too. You practice, hey, what would you play behind somebody who's soloing in this part? So you're doing those little chirp chords, because it's nice and easy. It gets you, the feel, gets you that rhythm going. I mean, there's a lot of good ways to use all of these things, all these tools that they have. So take advantage of the tools that are available to you, for sure.
And this is a good style for learning clean soloing.
Yeah.
When you can solo good clean, it only sounds even better when you add the distortion and all that.
Oh yeah,
this is a good starting point for learning how to solo.
Oh yeah, and when you mentioned Mixolydian, that's important also in this particular case, because with a lot of stuff where you would be trying to do Jerry Garcia stuff, just I always seem to fall right into Mixolydian mode because it just seems to be where it feels like everything is happening. A lot of the runs feel like, when you're doing pull-offs, it feels like that's what Jerry's going for there. So a lot of times, not like he was always in Mixolydian mode, but it just feels like that's a good place to be most of the time.
He had a habit.
He had a habit for sure, and some of the songs in particular, like they're built around that. But you can hear it happening, you can feel it happening, and the more you get into doing some of those, and some of those are just so easy also to structurally, where there's nothing complicated going on there. You're just dealing with 3 or 4 chords and just going around, but they come around in such a way that it doesn't just feel like a very boring song where there's just, oh, here's a chord and then here's a chord and then here's a chord. Like the song just has energy to it, which I like.
Yeah.
Always a fan.
That's Jeff Williams guitar. You can find him on YouTube.
Yes, indeed.
At Jeff Williams, right? Plus, he's got
I believe it is,
jeffwilliams.com.
Yes, exactly.
Yep, Jeff Williams guitar on YouTube and jeffwilliams.com.
Yep, and chord tones, guide tones, very important. Helps get you lined up to be able to fit in with whatever song you're trying to work with. You'll see that it's very useful information for sure. Now,
so we've learned to jam, we've learned to intonate. I think I can play Scarlet Begonias now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Mix bus. That would be a good choice.
Oh yeah, this is a great channel.
That was one for mastering the limited mix. When it's just too loud.
So this is about bringing the volume down then. Mastering.
Or it's about how to handle a mix when it's handed to you, and there's stuff that's definitely limited in the mix. So it's a question of which way.
Oh, so you're limited in what you can mix, like the tracks are already together, or?
Well, no. This is more like somebody gives you a track that was a brick, right? Remember a brick wave file? So it was limited because the track was way louder than we were able to record. And now, how can we try to still use the track? Is I think the question.
How to salvage some lemonade out of the lemons.
I think that's what we're going for here. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that's useful because there's a lot of lemons on BandLab. People can hand you lemon tracks all the time. So being able to make something useful out of it is important.
That's actually one of the challenges you'll have collabing on BandLab, especially if you're going to mix and engineer. You will deal with that.
Yep.
Yeah, this is coming out of Mixbus TV.
Yep. And he's got mixbustv.com as well.
I like these channels that are synchronized like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff.
Answering more questions from you guys. These are all from Instagram. We need to get to the ones on YouTube. You've asked so many. What you do if you need to master a track but dynamic is still very low? Any magic tricks, gear? There's a lot you can do when you get a mix that is kind of flat and has been flattened out or it lacks of dynamic. I can't really think of gear, like analog gear for something like that, although it will come to me in a second. But before going into the tricks, the reasons because you can have a mix that has a low dynamic, you receive a master that has a low dynamic, is because either has been limited or clipped already, or because the mix engineer did what I call a producer mix, right? Set and forget. No faders was moved in that mix, no EQ automation, no width automation, no top end, low end, saturation, nothing, no automation, just flat. EDM and electronic music mixes very often are like that. Just set the levels and forget. And they all leave everything to the arrangement and sounds coming and going. That's a producer mix. That's not a mix engineer mix. An assistant can do that. Set levels and forget. And so the mix is going to be flat. So the first scenario, if you get something that is limited and clipped already, I always ask, and it happened recently to me, I always ask, like, dude, I'm sorry, like, whatever, if you have, like, it's obvious you have clipping or limiting because it's chopped off. So you keep everything that you have on your 2-bus, just remove that. If that's not possible, because that's not possible, definitely Spiff by Oak Sound. It's an amazing spectral, I want to say, transient designer that can enhance the perceived punchiness of a track, or stems even better. The other one is by Newfangled Audio. I don't remember the name. Is a multi-band transient designer, which is great. And again, a little goes a long way. Ozone makes some crazy good restoring tools. For example, master rebalance, low end focus, the spectral, the harsher. These are amazing modules by Azotope that they can be used to bring up dynamics and more, or re-inject life into mixes that are like not ideal. Dr. MS, of course. Dr. MS, if you have any type of problem with stereo image, that has not much to do with dynamics, but with Dr. MS, the plugin version, you can automate, and even just changes in stereo width, or which doesn't necessarily mean only widen it, but also narrowing it. And also Dr. MS has the focus module, has the deep module. It's a whole bunch of things you can do that will re-inject dynamic. I don't see dynamic just as transients. I see dynamic as macro dynamics and movement in a track. That's why I made the example of the flat faders not moving mix, right? In mastering, when you have a flat mix, is going to be a lot of automation, of course, and you kind of have to do what the mix engineer didn't do in mixing, so you can reduce the low end a little bit, or wait for your low end boost for the verse, for the chorus or the hook or the big part, and leave it, you know, as is for the other section of the song. Same for top end. You can automate the top end to give the mix a little more movement and a little more emotion. But as far as dynamic intended as in transient, the first two transient designers that I mentioned is definitely what you need. And then of course compression can also re-inject dynamic, because a lot of people sees compression, especially in mastering, with like the fast attack, the kind of limiting, right? First of all, it's wrong to me to try to use a compressor to do the job of a limiter, right? That's why limiters are there. So if your job is controlling peaks in the most transparent way and reducing nominal level, the limiter is your tool. You want to change the envelope of something, that's the compressor. You want color, you bring the compressor. Compressor can definitely enhance attack, right? Slow attack, you tailor your sidechain so the compressor reacts kind of equally to the biggest transients, so kick and snare probably. If you need to do some extended sidechain EQing to get the compressor to trigger in that way, you can do that. Pro NB is also another great plugin, because you can set the trigger band free and independent from the frequency that you want to boost. So you can, for example, a trick that I showed in my mixing courses, you can trigger, let's say 3K, 4K, so the top end of a kick, but you trigger it by using the low end of a kick. So this is your sidechain input, so every time the kick hits, it will boost the 4K or 3K or whatever is that you want your kick click. That's a way to enhance the kick click, even if you don't have access to the kick. But yeah, these would be the first top of my head that I can think of. And I did it in a couple of mastering courses that are, you know, on the channel, but these would be the first that I can think of. I hope this answered the question. If you guys have questions for the Q&A, leave them in the comments down below. Please consider using the super thanks and support the channel. Click the join button, become a member if you want to access the exclusive content. Many new mixing and mastering courses are coming your way. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands grab my throat. Lift me up, man, take control. Heart is so gone, my type. Don't you know I fall for the bad type? You play the role of an angel pretty well, but I can say you came straight.
Oh yeah.
Mix Bus TV at YouTube.
Mix Bus TV. Mm-hmm.
Although he's also on the web at mixbustv.com.
Yep. Good stuff.
And
And
that
again, it's about
was
using the
good.
right tool for the job.
Good, yeah, good overall advice. You know, he didn't
Mhm.
like jump all over the place. He did just nice suggestions. Isotope, I completely agree. Great
Mhm.
place to start when you're trying to clean something up that you don't have all the stems or control that you want.
Indeed. Good stuff overall. And again, you're not always going to be working with, the best leveled tracks or the best mixed, projects that people send you. And, little nudges can help a whole lot. Like even just, I've had projects where people have just been showing me a project. I'm not even in the project. I'm just kind of, they're like, hey, look what I'm working on. And as I'm looking at it, you see, these two tracks are totally 100% clipped. Like you see the meters 100% red, like, poof, 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 killing it already. And so what you're listening to, like you get where the song's going, but that that's a simple thing. Like, you just bring it down just a little bit, and now we can listen to what it really should sound like. So, just little tweaks like that can make such a difference.
Yeah, and I like that he also mentioned stereo approaches
Yeah.
as well. The Blue Cats plugin that we looked at like
Yep.
last year or maybe even the year before. God, we've been at it for a while.
It was a while. It's been a couple of
But
years for sure.
those were plugins that really specialized in spreading out the track and spreading out the sound. And
And
those
the
can be
Sound of the
just as
Surround as
useful.
well.
Yeah.
That was the other one we looked at one point, which was fun for that.
Yeah, and that one comes free with Cakewalk.
Yep. Exactly. Good stuff. And you
Yes,
hear it when you know when you hear it too.
I will be back to Mixbus TV.
Yeah, definitely. And you should see his studio too. He's got some crazy gear around there.
Yeah. And a pinhead. He gets bonus points for pinhead.
There you go. Oh yeah.
Now, have you ever modded a guitar?
I have guitars that I've taken apart and put back together. I have
Well, don't you have a Telecaster?
I have part of a guitar right here. This is a pre-wired pick guard. So this is here. I'll do it this way. And up there. This is a pre-wired pick guard, and basically all the pickups are already wired, the switches and all that. All you would have to do is connect the input jack to the guitar, and it'd be set. But the guitar I was going to put that in, it was a down electric. But the board isn't as smooth. I mean, the thing is, I'm comparing it to my SG, so it's kind of an unfair comparison to compare it to my SG standard. But compared to my SG standard, it doesn't have the fretwork isn't as nice, the neck doesn't feel as good. So I feel it would be a waste to put these electronics into that guitar. But I have the electronics ready to go for a Strat style guitar, so I can make my own, or I could take my butcher block kitchen table here and cut out a guitar shape out of it and put these electronics in that if I want. So there's nothing we can do anything that we like with anything. I can make it out of metal, I can make it out of wood, whatever. I would probably stick to a kind of a standard thing, and was thinking actually more of Jerry Garcia, where some of those guitars he was using were very, very heavy compared to most other people's guitars, where my 5-string bass is very heavy, in the beginning, just because it's got the thicker neck and the big solid body. So getting a guitar that is heavier like that can add a lot of sustain and get you some really good tone out of the guitar. So that, it doesn't matter necessarily what exactly it's made of. If it is solid and has, and transmits the vibrations very well, you could make it into a guitar. So,
and what would be the primary reasons why a guitarist would want to mod a guitar? To adjust tone, adjust feel, weight? You mentioned
one that I would say is modifications that my buddy Mike made to his SG, because the SGs we had were identical, and the SG has the 2 volume controls, 2 tone controls, and the selector switch to go. It's a 3-way selector switch. With his guitar, he never liked the fact that it was 2 separate volumes. He always wanted just to have 1 volume control is controlling the overall output of the instrument. And then, so what we decided to do is to take one of the volume controls out and put in another flip switch to be able to switch between parallel or serial for the way the tone is traveling through the pickups. And he had another, I think it was made into a pull push for whether it was going to split the coil on the one pickup. But again, it was all custom stuff that he had done, but he kept all of the original parts from the SG. So if he ever, So he has all of the original stuff that was in the SG, and he didn't make any major modifications to the body. It was just a matter of changing the electronics because he wanted to get it back to where it was just one volume control to control everything. And then he had the way that he had his tone control set for his particular sound. Everything was already set. And he had his pedal board set up, kind of modeled after Trey Anastasia from Fish. So he had his tone that he was going for. And once he's, he was set. And the only things he really needed on the pedal board then were a boost or going into, a pitch shifter. If he wanted to go down tune, for example, he didn't have to tune the guitar down. He could just go to the one pedal and say, E flat, D flat, whatever. He could just tune down with the pedal.
So he was really modding for simplicity, to simplify.
Yes. And the different features. It turned out in the end he didn't use them as much as he would have. He was using them again for tone crafting. But when he looked back at the mods that he did, it was like he envisioned himself using the mods all the time, on stage, like between this song and that song, flipping from this tone to that tone and all that. But then when it came down to it, he just got the tone that he liked and would just stick with that. And now he's actually playing bass more than guitar. So, and I don't think he's playing much bass at that. But I think he'll be back to warming up guitar for the July party coming up soon, because he'll probably be playing this year again up at the 4th of July party.
And if you can mod a guitar, you can mod a bass.
Yes, correct.
Now see if you can dodge a wrench.
Dodge a wrench. So that was a long answer for if I've modded guitars. But yes, I've taken things apart and put things together. I've the idea of building my own, but I am excited to see what their process or discussion is for the modding of the guitars.
Yeah, this one was an interesting one as I was going through. It's not her normal type of video, although she is a modder, and she made this to just kind of explore other guitar subjects.
Mm-hmm.
It's Nizabel.
Nice.
And I think she is at Nizabel on YouTube. Yeah. No, she does have some modding videos.
Yes, indeed. Let's build a fuzz.
She's going to give us some tips and lessons she's learned from modding guitars and possibly what to avoid.
Nice. Let's do it.
Everyone, Nisabel here. I want to do something a little lower key tonight since if I'm timing this right, I'm in Japan right now, and I can't exactly bring all my tools in my carry-on. So instead of working on an instrument or a pedal or whatever else I can get my hands on, let's talk about 5 things I wish I knew before I started modding guitars in the first place. So I've been working on instruments at this point for a little over a decade, and in that time, I've made more than my fair share of mistakes. Why would they make that not fit? Most of these blunders just wasted my time, my parts, but some of them have resulted in injury to myself, or even worse, to a guitar. So if you're new to working on your own instruments, I thought I'd save you some of the hardships I encountered by just telling you what I learned from those experiences instead. Now, I'm not a professional by any means. I've mostly worked on my own instruments, and I've only ever teched for my friends' bands. So if you're expecting some seasoned vet with tours and tours under her belt, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm just a girl on the internet with a soldering iron. But if that's good enough for you, then let's jump into it. Let's start with one of the more recent lessons I've had to learn. Wear the right clothing. They always say dress for the job, and the job we're doing here usually involves sharp things, hot things, and more often than not, some combination of the two. So let's start with sleeves. Short sleeves are gonna be your best bet in terms of mobility, but if you're partial to something longer, just make sure they're tight to your forearms. The last thing that you want are loose long sleeves like these. This is a really good way to knock tools off your workbench and onto places they shouldn't be. For example, you can knock a hot soldering iron right onto your foot, or a sharp knife straight into your thigh. And yes, I've done both of those, thanks for asking. The next thing to think about is fabric. The most common mods that I do involve a fair amount of soldering, which does increase the risk of molten metal flying through the air. Natural fibers like cotton, linen, and wool are typically durable enough for molten solder to land and cool without dealing any damage. Synthetic fibers, on the other hand, have a comparably low melting point, and thinner fabrics will even melt right off of you if any molten metal comes remotely close. If you've been following my channel for the past few months, you might be familiar with a certain black polka dot dress of mine. Well, now it's a guitar strap. Why? I think you might be able to guess. So make sure to keep your sleeves short and your fabrics natural. And if you need a new guitar strap, I promise you there are better ways than destroying your favorite dress. Number 2, soldering irons are loud. Now, before you call me crazy, no, soldering irons are not loud for you and me. They're loud for our guitars. Let me show you what I mean. Ariel is the quietest and most well-shielded of all my guitars, and this is what her noise floor sounds like. And this is what it sounds like when my soldering iron's on. It's pretty loud, isn't it? Now, I won't bore you with the physics that I pretend to understand, but reasons aside, this interference makes it hard to diagnose problems with your shielding or your wiring. When I was first getting started, I tore down and rewired my first bass more times than I could count, searching for some non-existent grounding issue that was causing all the noise that I was hearing. It was only after I turned off my iron in defeat that the noise stopped, and I realized there was never an issue in the first place, and that I had just wasted a perfectly good Saturday. So in short, make sure to turn off your iron before you test for signal. Now, number 3, make sure your parts are the right size and be prepared when they're not. This applies to everything from neck scale length to aftermarket pickguards to even tuning machines. But the place where I've run into this issue the most is with metric versus imperial parts. Generally speaking, import guitars like Squiers, Epiphones, or non-American Fenders are built with metric sized parts, while Gibsons and American Fender guitars are built imperial. Additionally, a lot of common aftermarket parts like Switchcraft jacks and CTS pods are typically made to imperial measurements. So if you're looking for the quickest and most seamless way to replace parts on your guitar, be sure you check that the parts you're ordering and the parts that you're replacing are made to the same specs. Now, does this mean that you can't use American parts in like a Japanese Fender? No, you absolutely can, and I do it all the time. But you do need to be prepared for the extra work that entails. This may involve filing holes to the right size, filling and drilling others to make them smaller, or even routing out cavities to make parts fit. As for other non-compatible parts, there are a ton of conversion parts out there to help you out. Want to put vintage Clusen style tuners in a guitar drilled for moderns? There's a bushing for that. Want to make your Telecaster a Les Paul in disguise with the same scale length? There's a conversion neck for that one. The beauty of guitar modding is that we can do absolutely anything we want, but if you are going to spec swap to build your dream guitar, keep in mind any extra work and extra parts you might need. And number 4, don't start with a semi or hollow body guitar. So my very first electric guitar was this beautiful Ibanez AM73B named Alice. She wore a set of pearly gates, a couple coil splits, and I loved that guitar right up until the day she was stolen. But my God, that was the worst guitar in the world to learn on. The wonderful thing about solid body guitars is that all their electronics are easily accessible whether through a backplate, a pickguard, or a control plate. With hollow body guitars, the only way to work with the electronics is to pull every component you need to work with out through the F-hole. But getting the components out is only half the battle. The real struggle is putting them back when you're done. Now, by no means am I saying don't work on semi-hollow guitars, but before you do, know what you're getting yourself into. Here's a few tricks that I learned to make the process a little bit easier. Number 1, tape up your F-holes. Since we're repeatedly pulling components through these openings, we increase the risk of scratches and chipping. The tape acts as a barrier to help mitigate some of that damage. Number 2, cover the area around the F-hole with a towel. This protects the finish from solder drips or the occasional drop tool. Number 3, have every tool at your disposal, even ones you don't think you need. I use anything from tweezers to string to even motorcycle spokes to help seat components back into place. And finally, when none of the tools you have work, make better ones. This is a guitar cable end soldered to a wire, and it allows me to attach the end to the output jack and pull it through the body to where it needs to be. Sometimes, the best tools for the job are the ones that you make yourself. And the last tip that I have for you is number 5, mod to solve a problem. I did my first pickup replacement at the tail end of elementary school, and I remember at the time being pretty disappointed with the outcome. I was expecting to sound like all the bands I was listening to with perfect tone and crystal clear articulation, but when I flipped on my amp, I still just sounded like me. That's because the issue wasn't my pickups, my pots, or even my amp. The issue was a skill-based one. I was a kid who had only been playing bass for about a year, and a new pickup wasn't going to change that. It took me a while to get here, but I think of modding as finding a solution to a problem. Is your sound too bright? Maybe try pots with less resistance. Is your instrument too noisy? Some shielding may help you there, but also make sure your soldering iron's off. If the problem is that there's still sounds out there that you haven't tried yet, then by all means, keep going until you've heard absolutely everything the world has to offer. But don't expect a new pickup or part to solve all of your problems. The right parts can get you closer to sounding like your favorite musicians, but you still need to take care of that extra last little bit yourself. To me, a well-modded instrument is one that gets you excited to play every single time you pick it up. That way you're more motivated to tackle the problems that sandpaper and solder can't quite solve. Now, like I said at the top, I've only been at this for a little over 10 years and never professionally. And while I've already messed up a ton, I know that I'll keep making mistakes and learning from them as I keep going. But I also know that a lot of you out there have a ton more experience than I do, and I'd love to hear what bits of wisdom you can give to the rest of us down in the comments below. I think that's all I have for you tonight, but once I'm back home, let's build something fun. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one. Happy playing.
Oh, I love her.
Yes, indeed.
What a great
Some key
outlook.
points there. I mean, make your own tools, or make a better tool if you don't have the right tool. Absolutely. 100% right mindset there. Made
And
tools
she
many
kind of
more times than I
answered
can tell you.
the question on why somebody does a mods a guitar. She kind of answered it with that fifth tip really well.
True. Yeah. To solve a problem. And that is a good answer, because solving a problem is, that's usually, again, that's one of my primary focuses, being a tech support and trouble many decades. It's just built into who I am. So when people approach me with, hey, I wish I had this, or, this isn't working the way I wanted, or whatever, I'm always approaching it from that troubleshooting or problem solving perspective of, okay, how can we fix that? And if, we only have access to these things, well, can we fix it with, some cardboard and some string and some this? Let's find out,
Yeah,
do what we can.
and if you're not trying to solve a problem, it's possible you might create a problem.
Yeah. Or you might learn how to fix a different problem. You might fix a problem you didn't know you had, like what she had with the soldering iron there. When she broke
I
down
know,
the
wasn't
instrument
that
to
funny?
fix all that, it's funny, but also it's instructive for several reasons. Because one is, took the whole thing apart, checked all this, did that, and then realized it was the soldering iron. But you also, got that much more familiar with your instrument. Like, the inner, you took everything out, you put everything back. It's kind of like taking your car and taking everything apart and putting it all back together. How, you intricately know how it all, comes together at that point. And there's not that much to guitars and basses, honestly. Like, it seems like, this magical box, like if you were to open it up, like, ooh, what's inside? It's not that crazy what it is. Because again, it's, most of it's right there on the pick guard. And like what I have right here, a pre-wired pick guard has almost everything you'd need right off the bat, ready to go.
Well, and it does kind of make sense, if you're soldering and you want to test it, you're anxious and you try testing it without turning off the soldering gun. I can understand that scenario.
Oh yeah. Uni, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. I like it. Then you need to fix it.
Well, I do like her. I like her attitude.
Yes,
She's
very
got
much.
she got some great videos in here.
And that's a
It
new
would
one for
be
me, so I'll definitely be checking more videos out there for sure.
Nisabel at YouTube.
Yep. And the whole point about the non-American made fenders versus American important as well. If you're going to be doing replacements of parts and all of that kind of thing, like my my Gibson is American made, but my Fender bass is Mexican. So I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I'm not sure which would be on the Mexican, whether it would be the Imperial parts or
Yeah.
not.
Do they use the metric system or?
I would have to check. I mean, as far as I don't think I've replaced anything on it, so I wouldn't know based on that. But that's one of the other things about the the J bass that I like a lot is it's very basic. I mean, it's got that pickup, and strings. And it's like, nothing else to mess with. 2 volume controls, one for each pickup, and then you got how much tone overall. No selector switch, because it's just the volume. If you don't want the front pickup, you just turn the volume off on the front pickup, and then you're all back pickup. Oh, he's got the minions going now. Nice musical minions.
So
bonus points.
we've intonated. We've learned to mod. What about getting faster with your playing?
Ah, yes.
Everybody has their own approach there.
Yep. And we've actually gone through a couple of different videos for improving playing speed, but I like to watch every one of them, because you can pick up little bits out of all of them. And even if it's just, something that you just pick up, like again, in that 5 minutes that you're going to pick up the guitar on a day where you don't really have time to play, some of these are exercises that you can just pick it up, do this mindless thing for 5 minutes, and then put it back down. But then your hands are still ready to go for that day when you do have a couple hours to play, and your hands are ready to go, and they're not going to let you down.
Yeah, and what I like with these is it applies to keyboards as well. A lot of these techniques, you just got to translate.
So much of it just comes down to the quick answer of muscle memory. Like, build that muscle memory, do the thing the right way over and over again, so that your hands know how to do the right thing when the time comes.
So this is another freshie for us, Lauren Bateman, another guitar instructor on YouTube. You guitarists out there are so lucky, man, because YouTube, chock full of guitar knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And she helps make guitars make sense.
Nice.
At Lauren Bateman on YouTube.
New one for me as well.
I love it. All their names match.
Well done.
So she's going to show us how to get faster fingers in 1 week, which is a reasonable amount of time. I mean, it's not going to happen in one day, but a week
Right.
of practice can.
And understanding incremental improvement. It's important.
I'm going to show you a very special finger exercise that's going to help you get faster fingers in 1 week, and you don't even need a guitar pick. A big question I get asked about students all the time is, Lauren, how do I get my fingers faster for playing scales or chord changes? And it all comes down to the same mechanics. Now, I see lots of teachers out there teaching spider exercises, and I teach spider exercises as well, but there is a special exercise that really focuses on the tendons in your hand. Now, why is this so important? I want you to put your hand up in front of your face, okay? And I want you to bend your pinky finger, okay? Just like this, okay? Look what happens to your third finger, all right? When you bend your pinky, even your second finger moves just a little bit. You cannot move your pinky and you cannot move your third finger without other fingers going with it. So I have a great exercise here that mimics chord changes, but it's also going to help you with playing scales and other stuff as well too. But it's going to help us get real independence on our fingers. So speed comes down to two things when playing guitar. It comes down to muscle memory. Okay, can you actually make these chords changes, or can you play these scales without necessarily needing to look at the guitar? Because as soon as you start thinking about things, it starts slowing down that time factor. So if you can start doing things off muscle memory, that helps a lot too. But also is relaxation. Okay, I used to be a boxer. I used to do amateur boxing, and I always tell people, if you get really tense and you try to force a punch out there, when you have so much tension, there's only so fast you can go. It's going to be slow. But if you relax your arm, relax your body, boom, and you just throw a punch out there, you can do it much quicker when you're relaxed. So speed actually comes for relaxation, and that's what this exercise is going to focus on. Now, this is one of a few exercises that I teach in my 7-level guitar system to develop finger dexterity. And what we're going to do in this, we're going to go through this step by step, and I'm going to give you some tips. So please stick through the whole thing so that you get the tips on this exercise. We're going to start on the 3rd string, the G string, and we're going to be at frets 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, I have all of my fingers now. Now, for some people, this, to keep all these fingers down, might be too much of a stretch. Now, you might have to go up to frets 7, 8, 9, and 10, okay? Because these frets are a little bit shorter, and it doesn't matter. It's not really the distance, the stretch right now we're working on. It's more the tendons. So if this is more comfortable for you, that's totally fine as well. I'm going to go back to 5, 6, and 7, and 8 because that's where I'm used to doing it. And what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of like finger push-ups. One finger at a time individually, and we're going to start with the first finger. And the goal is to try and keep all of these fingers down. Now, if you're just getting started and you have a lot of tension, you may have to use your other fingers to hold your other fingers in place. And what we're going to do is take this first finger, go up to the top string and down to the bottom string. Okay, so top string, bottom string, top string, bottom string. And try not to do this with your wrist. Try not to use your wrist to assist you. I'm going to pull up my sleeve so you guys can see my wrist here. Okay, try to keep your wrist neutral. And it's just the finger that is moving. Top string, bottom string, top string, bottom string. And for a lot of people, the first finger is not going to be a problem at all. You're going to be able to do this. Now, I recommend doing up and down about 20 times and moving on to the next finger. Okay, so now we're going to do finger number 2. All right, and finger number 2 also doesn't give people a lot of issues, but again, do it 20 times so you can work on the finger independence. The issue is now going to come in where these next 2 fingers, and I showed you why. It's because the tendons in the hands, when you move these fingers, especially this third finger, look when you move this third finger, you've got the pinky moving and your middle finger moving. So that third finger is really connected, and when you guys go to do a C chord to a G chord change, look at that third finger, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to mimic what we're doing in chord changes. That's what we're doing here. So now I'm going to skip the third finger for now because it tends to be the worst. And you'll see in a few seconds why. The other problem finger is the pinky. Sometimes people, they cannot reach the strings. If you cannot reach the top string with your pinky yet, don't worry. If you can get to the 5th string, that's fine too. But try your best to get it to go up and down as fast as possible on those strings. Now, when you're doing this exercise, do not forget to breathe, okay? If you are not breathing, you are not getting oxygen to your muscles, you are adding in tension, okay? So just relax, remember to breathe. Here's the problem finger. Finger number 3, okay? Almost everyone has a problem. I learned this exercise after I've been playing guitar for 10 years, and I was still, I could barely move the 3rd finger. Now, when you go up to the top string, it's probably easy. The hard part's gonna come right here. Lowering it down to the 1st string. When I first started, I couldn't do this. So I'm gonna give you guys a little tip. In the beginning, you might need to use your other finger to assist you on getting this finger to go up and down, okay? But the important part to remember here is to relax. Breathe. Do not force the finger down. Don't muscle it down. That's tension. We want to relax. Breathe. Breathe out. Relax the finger, okay? We want to get this finger to move relaxed. Now you can see I can move this finger up and down pretty easily. It works really well. I could not do that when I first learned this exercise. Now there is a huge disclaimer, a big warning I have to give you about this exercise, so please do not click away just yet, because this is very, very important. So this is what we call a repetitive motion exercise. We're doing the same motion up and down, up and down, up and down. Now if you overdo this, a little bit of this exercise goes a long way. If you overdo this, because of this motion you're doing, you could develop carpal tunnel if you overdo it. So here is my practice recommendation. A little goes a long way. If you are sitting down to practice, 20 up and downs per finger, okay? So 20 are an up and down, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? You're gonna do 20 per finger and then you're done, okay? That's it, all right? 20 ups and downs per finger. Work on relaxing. If your 3rd and 4th finger are really, really bad, what I would recommend doing is do these 2 fingers, do the whole set at the beginning of your practice, and then at the end of your practice, just focus on the 3rd and 4th fingers. Do 20 more reps with just those 2, and I guarantee in the next 1 to 2 weeks, these chord changes are going to be moving much faster, because instead of just sitting here and doing spider exercises, you're actually focusing on the things that are mimicking the chord changes, and you're actually working on finger independence, which will help you relax, and that will help you go faster. Now, if you found this video super helpful, I have lots of tips like this in my 7-level guitar system. It is a beginner guitar system designed to help students just like you go from absolute beginner to playing the songs that you know and love. We work on chords, we work on strumming, we work on finger independence, and I've helped so many students just like you finally have more fun playing their guitar. Check out the link in the description below. I hope to see you guys in a lesson video real soon.
See, she went beyond the spider techniques.
Yeah. And I like that. And even in trying it, I was actually surprised at how my 3rd and 4th finger were both pretty able to just go ahead right into it and not have a problem. Not that I should be surprised, 'cause I've been playing for a while, but it is one of those things that when I've tried some of those spider exercises, it's the first time I try, it's like, whoa, it feels really weird because I haven't done that move a lot. But in this case, I guess I've done enough different stuff where, and plus the tendons are in my hands anyway. I have big hands, and I'm playing on, when I'm playing on a guitar, for example, that stretch from the top to the bottom string doesn't feel that bad compared to my 5-string bass.
And you're a pretty relaxed kind of guy. So like her emphasis there about the importance of the breathing, I hadn't even thought of, but it's true. When you're holding your breath that way, or you're not breathing properly, you do tense up. And when you're playing fast, tense does not equal accuracy.
Right. Also, it's important that, no matter how fast you get at playing, you have to know or have a good idea of what you're about to play before you play it. So you can play as fast as you want, but if you don't know what you're playing next, you have to still think about what you're going to play next before you start playing.
Yeah, she does making guitars make sense. She lives up to the name.
Yeah, I love it. That's a new find for me as well.
Yeah, Lauren Bateman.
Getting a bunch of those lately. I like that. I'm finding new people for you. You're finding new people for me.
That's the beauty of what we do.
Oh yeah, and then the channel that we're building over here, the fact that we're doing all these follows from our shared channel means that the recommendations that we're getting are all coming up. Even people that we haven't seen their channels before, they're like, "Oh, you like this stuff? Oh, well, here's more of this stuff." So it's a very focused
Yeah,
channel. I like that.
and I'm getting recommendations from our viewers. Uni hooked me up with something for next week.
Nice. There you go. Yeah, and that's the thing is, you guys also, anytime you guys have things that you want to see us cover, let us know, and we'll see what we can find, because there's a lot of topics out there. There's a lot of them we can go back to and hit again, because there's some topics that we could hit multiple times, all the time, different videos, different aspects of different things. And
Oh
we'll find
yeah,
more
what do you
stuff.
guys want to know?
Now I know that we have some things that are in the yeah, there you go. We have a few different things that are over here. One of them was about, I think it was
Oh,
the one about.
I think the
Yep.
fingerstyle guitar is calling me.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. This one, and I want to say, I don't remember about the best way to learn scalar mode. If that was the one about doing it all on one string. If we had talked about that one previously, I know it was one that was here. I don't remember if we talked about it though. So we can go right into fingerstyle and we'll figure it out after.
Yeah, now this one I don't have the tab up at the moment, but by the end I should be able to find it.
Yeah.
But I added this one actually, I think last week, or maybe the week. We were talking about Jake's fingerstyle approach.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm so fascinated by fingerstyling with guitars, acoustic guitars. I think it's super important to master.
Indeed. And this is another one where having a guitar in your hands when you're watching these helps, because you can just try to figure some of this stuff out, some of the noodling that's going on, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, what we're going to see here is 10 essential patterns that make it easy to play fingerstyle guitar.
So it's actually been proven that you'll be able to play 87% of fingerstyle songs just using these 10 patterns, which I'm about to show you. Actually, I just made that bit up, but it certainly feels that way to me. And these patterns are used a lot, and by learning them, you'll be able to play loads of famous fingerstyle tunes, and I think they'll give you a really solid foundation in fingerstyle guitar. So this lesson is aimed at fingerstyle beginners, and if you've not done any of this kind of thing before, then I just suggest taking it really slowly, taking these patterns one at a time, getting really comfortable with them, and then moving on to the next one when you're ready. And there's easily 6 months of work contained within this video, so don't feel bad about taking your time with it. And if you have played a bit of fingerstyle before, then maybe you'll be able to go a little bit faster, and you can use these 10 patterns as kind of a fingerstyle workout to really get your technique together. So in traditional YouTube style, I have a top 10 must-know essential fingerstyle patterns for you. And I'm calling them folk fingerstyle patterns, although they're very versatile, and you'll certainly find this kind of thing in blues and in country and in indie. They're all over the place, these kind of patterns. So let's get started with pattern number 1. Let's start nice and simple, and then as we go through these patterns, I'm gradually going to push up the difficulty level. And the first thing I want to say is that with this type of fingerstyle playing, it's really all about the thumb and keeping a steady alternating bass note. That's what holds everything together. And then the fingers really just do their thing on the higher strings. So as far as some basic technical pointers go for your picking hand, I would suggest that you keep your thumb playing the bass notes on the lowest 3 strings, and then you're going to be using your fingers on the highest strings. What I would recommend is generally using your first finger, your index finger on the 3rd string, your middle finger on the 2nd string, and your ring finger on the high E strings. Just a guideline, so there are no rules, and there are plenty of great fingerstyle players I can think of who just use 3 fingers, or even a lot of blues players who just use a thumb and 1 finger. That's totally acceptable, but I think at least in the beginning, have a try using 3 fingers on your picking hand, and it can lead to being a bit more versatile in the long run, I think. Let's start by holding down a simple C chord, and we're going to start by establishing that alternating bass. I'm just going between the 5th string and the 4th string. Really important you just get comfortable with that very simple motion. So just rocking back and forth between those 2 strings and just keeping it nice and steady, nice and even. And as far as the hand position goes with your picking hand, I do recommend that you try and keep your palm and the side of the hand quite close to the strings. Often with this kind of style of playing, you're going to want to just have a little bit of gentle palm muting just to stop the bass strings from getting too woolly. And you can play this style with more of a classical or flamenco style picking hand where your wrist comes out a little bit more, but that means that you can't really get that muting happening, so not quite so good for this kind of thing if you ask me. So once you've got that alternating bass, we're going to add the fingers, and it's going to be nice and simple, and we're just going to have the fingers in between the bass notes. So we're going to play a bass note, and then first finger is going to play the third string, and then the next bass note, and that's going to be followed by the second string. So in terms of strings, it's 5, 3, 4, 2. So very simple, but make sure you're really comfortable with that. Make sure you can do it really well and it's smooth and it's even. This is where you're just going to need to put the time in if you've never done this kind of thing before, because it's all about muscle memory and repeating it. So take it slow, be accurate, and then just play that pattern 100 times, play it 1,000 times, just until it becomes completely automatic. So that's our basic pattern. It will work well with all 5th string root chords, so C, A minor, those kind of chords. If you're playing this pattern with a chord that has its root on the 6th string, then you'll just have to adjust the bass slightly. So this is worth practicing as well. It's the same pattern, but instead of the bass going from 5 to 4, the bass is going from 6 to 4, and that's the most common alternating bass that you get with 6th string root chords. So if I hold down a G chord, then our pattern will look like this. So we've got 6, 3, 4, 2. So once you've got both of those together, we can try taking that pattern through a simple chord progression. So let's try C, A minor, F and G, and that would sound like this. So pattern number 2, we're just going to reverse the order of the fingers. So instead of going 5, 3, 4, 2, we're going to go 5, 2, 4, 3. So and the same thing applies if you're using a 6th string root chord. The bass is going to go from the 6th to the 4th strings. Why don't we take that through a little chord progression as well. So let's try C, G, A minor, F this time. Pattern number 3 is another simple variation on our basic pattern, and it sounds like this. Very simple but very, very widely used, this pattern. And what's going on is this: we've got our normal alternating bass, and this time we've got finger notes after the 2nd and 3rd bass notes. So that looks like this. 5, 4, 3, 5, 2, 4. Got a nice skip to it, this pattern. That's our pattern. Let's apply that to a chord progression. Why don't we go A minor, F, C and G this time. And once again, you're just adjusting that bass pattern slightly when you're using a 6th string root chord, so you're going from 6 to 4 instead. So that would sound like this. So far with these patterns we've had the thumb and the finger notes separate, but equally common is to have thumb and finger notes sounding at the same time, and then you've got kind of a pinch effect going on with your picking hand. So this pattern sounds like this. Very, very common, this pattern. And we're starting off with a pinch, and I've got the thumb on the 5th string. I'm using my middle finger on the 2nd string, just pinching those two together. Then I've got my index finger on the 3rd string, and then the next bass note. And then in the second half of the pattern, it's just thumb alternating with fingers. Let's have a chord progression then. Why don't we do C, C7, and then F, and back to C again. And with the F chord, you've got a choice. You can play it as a bar chord, or quite often with fingerstyle stuff, I just use my thumb over the top. But the progression sounds like this. Next one is another pattern with a pinch, and this time we're moving the pinch to beat 2, and it sounds like this. So starting off with just a single bass note, then I'm pinching the 4th and 2nd strings together, bass note, then the 3rd string, and another bass note. And as usual with a 6-string root chord, the thumb is just going to switch to 6 to 4. So let's take that pattern through a chord progression. Why don't we go C, and then I'm just going to move that C chord up 2 frets, and then we'll have an F and a G. So and one great thing about these fingerstyle patterns is that you can string them together in various different ways. And in fact, in fingerstyle songs, very often you've got a combination of different picking patterns. So this next example is a combination of the previous 2 patterns, and it sounds like this. So we've got pattern 5, and then straight into pattern 4. It's a 2-bar pattern which just has a little bit more interest to it. So let's take that through the same chord progression as previously. It's going to get a little bit harder now, and for the next few patterns we're going to make the bass part a little bit more complex. And with a lot of fingerstyle stuff, you've got a choice of keeping it simple and just rocking back and forth between a pair of different bass notes, or you can add in a 3rd bass note, and then you're getting into what is known as Travis picking. We're going to start with our C chord once again, and instead of this being our bass line, just 5 to 4, we're going to do this. So we're going from 5 to 4 and then 6 to 4. So 5, 4, 6, 4. And if you're holding down a C chord, then you're just going to need to move your 3rd finger over to the 3rd fret on the low E string for that 3rd note. Or of course you can refinger your C chord and play it like that, in which case you don't need to bother moving a finger. But that's our bass part. And now we're going to add in the fingers, and it's really just the same pattern as pattern number 1, but we've just added in the Travis bass part. So that sounds like this. So it starts exactly like pattern 1. So 5, 3, 4, 2, and then all we're doing is changing the bass note. So we've got 6, 3, 4, 2. Then it's just a question of putting those 2 bits together. And once again, it's all about muscle memory, all about repetition. So just play that thousands of times until it becomes completely second nature. Let's have a chord progression. Why don't we have C, C7, and then I'm going to keep the same chord shape and I'm just going to move it up to an F7. So So if we want to use that pattern with a 6-string root chord, then the bass pattern is going to change slightly. So let's see how it would work on an E chord. And now the thumb is going to do this. So we're going from 6 to 4 and then 5 to 4. And if we add in the fingers, we've got 6, 3, 4, 2, 5, 3, 4, 2. And let's have a chord progression. Why don't we go E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, and A. So all 6-string root shapes in this one. And the next pattern goes like this. And we've got that same Travis style bass, so just 5, 4, 6, 4. And this time we're introducing a pinch on the first beat. So we've got pinching the 5th and the 2nd strings together. And then for the rest of the pattern you've got alternating thumb and fingers. And for added interest you could actually add in some different high notes, and that would sound a bit like this. So then you're getting into kind of Dear Prudence type territory. And when we're moving to 6-string root chords, the same thing applies as with the previous pattern. The bass part has to change just slightly. So if we did that pattern with an F chord, it would look like this. So the bass is 6, 4, 5, 4. So let's have a chord progression. Let's go C, A minor, F, and G7. So the last pattern is really just a variation on pattern 4, and we're just adding in the Travis bass to that pattern, and it sounds like this. So the bass is the same. I'm just holding down a C chord again here, so it's 5, 4, 6, 4. We've got a pinch on beat 1, and then we've got the third string with the finger and the bass note. And with the 6-string root chord. And let's have our last chord progression. Why don't we go C, E, F, and back to C again. And once again, if you wanted to, you can throw in some variations on the top notes as well. So So those are the 10 patterns that I hope are going to make you into a fingerstyle superstar. And I realise that I've included a ton of information in this one short video, maybe too much information. I could have made a 6-hour course on this material or something, but I think that's fine. Just take your time. If you need to spend a week on each of these patterns, a month on each of these patterns, then do that. And just gradually put the time in, put the effort in, and you will get there. And just briefly, for those of you who are curious about the guitar I'm using today, this is a Martin 0015M. It's a 00 sized acoustic, which just means it's got a slightly smaller body size, which I think works well for fingerstyle guitar. It's got a nice balanced tone to it, and it's all mahogany, so again that's got particular tonal characteristics, perhaps a slightly darker tone than a spruce topped acoustic guitar or something like that. That's it for this video. I hope you find it useful, and I hope it serves as a nice introduction to the delights of fingerstyle guitar. And where do you go from here? I would suggest just learning as many tunes as you can, and there are plenty of quite beginner-friendly fingerstyle songs that use exactly these patterns. So I'll try and put together a bit of a list or a playlist of various beginner-friendly fingerstyle pieces for you. Thanks very much for watching. I shall see you next time.
Damn, he makes that look easy.
Yeah, some really good style there. Really like that. The pre-recorded part is just we show, we're watching videos of things that we're trying to expose people to, different channels and things like that. But this part is not pre-recorded. Like this, I'm live, he's live.
Yes, we're hunting rabbits. Musical
We're hunting rabbits right now. But yes, we do this on Thursdays. And this is the, we're at the tail end here. I think we have time for maybe one more. We've been going for almost 3 hours so far. So
yeah,
I think we have time for one more.
We've gone all over the guitar neck tonight.
Yeah, we have. Now, how about a songwriting something for finishing up? That'd be cool.
Well, and this goes towards like, musical terms. In a cadence is something you've probably heard the word, but do you know what it means?
Yeah, chat delay's pretty short, only a couple seconds. We were just in the middle of that video still. But we can see, like I see stream delay, and if you said a word like now, I would say now, and it would be like right there.
Oh shit, man! I'm watching on this screen, the live stream. I'm watching myself say what I just said. You want to talk about a mind fuck?
What you gotta do is you gotta turn around. You go, wait, which part of the movie is this? Oh wait, this is
well,
now.
Where
this
are
is
we?
now in the movie. We're
when
right
was
about
then?
to do cadence. Oh, you missed it just now. We're gonna talk about cadences and 4 types of cadences.
Yeah, real quick before I bring that one up, I just wanted to give a mention because I found the page, and anyone can play guitar, and I got to give him credit. I feel like I could fingerprint pick after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just seeing those patterns and realizing, what's going on there and how important just that bass bounce is in the 2 different patterns he was using, the one where you're just bouncing the one way and one where you're bouncing the other way. Just really great stuff there.
Yeah, I have to figure out how to get my thumb to go 6, 4, 5 like he did.
Yep.
The top half, the 3 fingers on the bottom half, I understand why that's easy. But
Mhm.
getting that accurate thumb bounce, especially as he progressed through the patterns towards the end,
Mhm.
6 4 5 4 6 4. I mean, that's got to take a little practice.
Takes a little bit. And actually, as I was just kind of messing around practicing with it, it's moves that I haven't done that much, but it's moves that still make sense. And I really like the pinch move also, the second and fifth string, doing that, because I
Yes.
actually do that with the first and the sixth string sometimes for some of the moves I do. I think Bulldog, Hey Bulldog by the Beatles is one that has a sound where it sounds right for me to play the fat E string and the skinny E string at the same time. But I leave the rest of the notes out.
Well, he really did cover in 20 minutes what 6 months worth of pattern knowledge. Got to
Absolutely.
give him credit that anyone can play guitar.
Yep.
At ACPG on YouTube.
Ah, sweet.
So, is there anyone can guitar? Just take the first letters.
What most impressive instrument to play? That's a good question. It's really hard to say. I mean, I play a lot of different
Well, it
instruments.
depends
Most
what
impressive
impresses
is,
you.
yeah, exactly.
If you're impressed by guitarists, then I guess the guitarist who plays good for you impresses you.
I was going to say I could see somebody impress me on a kazoo. I mean, probably not many people, but there are people who could turn literally anything into a virtuoso sounding instrument. A blade of grass, a piece of twine. you could make something like that.
I have actually seen impressive kazoo work.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit, Jan Carlos, Ange's friend, can sound like a kazoo with his mouth. So
Yeah, nice.
that impressed the hell out of me.
Yeah. As far as the skill that it takes to play an instrument, even on that question, what I like is the Chapman stick. I would go with at this point, just because that does combine aspects of a guitar and a keyboard, and I think like that would be if I could attain the skill to be able to play that, because I feel like already I could pick it up pretty quickly. Just being able to play a guitar, like understanding where notes and chords are with either hand from doing keyboard and from doing guitar. I think I could transition to a Chapman stick, but they're expensive and they aren't just sitting around for people to mess with all the time. So it's like I would need to get my hands on one to try it. But that, I think, when I see people playing a Chapman stick impressively, I find that very impressive.
Yeah, like you said, when somebody's doing it good, they clearly have knowledge of the keyboard approach and the guitar approach, and they're utilizing a new instrument.
And in a similar way, the harpeggi that we've looked at, I think last week, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, we looked at a video of the harpeggi, which had 16, 24 individual strings. So you could play it kind of like a keyboard. You could play it it's guitar strings essentially. So you play it kind of like a stringed instrument. You could have multiple people attack it from different angles and play different sections of the instrument at the same time. So there's, things like that as well. Instruments that not everybody would even know about might be, more impressive just in terms of when you see what people can actually do with it. That's again what
Shit, if any of you guys out there have a harpeggi, whether you can play it or not, I'll be impressed that you've got one and ready to go.
And another thing that would be a fun one to do as an instrument project. I was talking about, I don't have the makings to just make a guitar, but it wouldn't be that hard, I don't think, to make what goes into making a harpeggi. I'd have to look it up though. I'd have to see what it all looks like. Homemade harpeggi, I don't know about that.
If you build it, I will play it.
I would try it for sure. I think it would be cool. Harp is cool too, yeah.
So to wrap up, we're gonna look at cadences, the 4 types that there are: perfect, plagal, imperfect, and interrupted.
Nice. And this is the songwriting part of the evening.
Oh, and this comes from an awesome channel. I know I've already been there. See, I'm already subscribed.
Absolutely. There's a reason for that.
But yeah, Music Theory Academy over on YouTube. Tons of information. I mean, when you're ready to learn music theory, go here.
Yep. That's why they called it that.
Yeah, strategic name.
Most excellent.
So this is Cadences, the 4 types explained.
Right.
Hi everyone, Ben here from musictheoryacademy.com. In this lesson, we're going to be having a look at cadences. And we're going to look at the following. Firstly, what is a cadence? Secondly, we're going to look at finished and unfinished cadences. I'm also going to introduce you to the 4 main types of cadence that you'll come across. And finally, we're going to have a look at how to use cadences in our compositions. So firstly, what is a cadence? Well, a cadence is simply a chord progression of at least 2 chords that ends a phrase or a section of music. Music is like spoken word. It's divided into phrases. It's divided into sections. Let's have a look at an example in spoken word. Here's a well-known children's rhyme. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. This is divided into phrases. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. That phrase sounds finished. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. That phrase also sounds finished. But there's a phrase in the middle, all the king's horses and all the king's men, that is unfinished. Okay, it sounds like it's got to keep going. All the king's horses and all the king's men, it doesn't make sense until you put something after it. Couldn't put Humpty together again. Music is exactly the same. You have phrases in music that sound finished, and you have phrases in music that sound unfinished. And it is the choice of cadence at the end of a phrase that determines whether it sounds finished or unfinished. So let's have a look at the finished cadences in music. Okay, finished cadences, not surprisingly, always end on chord 1. That's what gives it the sense that the phrase is finished. And there are 2 types of finished cadences. The first is the perfect cadence, which is sometimes known as the authentic cadence as well. And this goes from chord 5 to chord 1. So let's have a look at an example in C major. Here I've got a short musical phrase. It's only 2 bars long, but you can see that it ends with the chord 5 followed by chord 1. That is the cadence, and in notation you get this little line between the 2 chords that indicates the cadence. Let's have a listen to this example. You can hear clearly how the cadence and the movement from 5 to 1 gives this definite sense that it is finished. Let's have a listen to the example again, but this time in C minor. Again, you can hear how this perfect cadence at the end, the chords 5 to 1, gives this definite, complete, finished sound to it. So that's the first finished cadence. The second finished cadence is called the Plagal cadence. Now this goes from chord 4 to chord 1. This again sounds finished, but it's a gentler finish than the perfect cadence. It's sometimes called the Amen cadence because it's often used in very traditional hymns to sing Amen at the end of the hymn. Let's have a look and a listen to an example of a Plagal cadence, again in C major. You can hear how it sounds finished, but it's a gentler finish than the perfect cadence. Let's have a listen to it this time in C minor. So those are our 2 finished cadences. We have the perfect or authentic cadence, which is chord 5 to 1, and the Plagal cadence, which is chords 4 to 1. So what about the unfinished cadences? Well, not surprisingly, these never end on chord 1, because if they did end on chord 1, they would sound finished. Again, we've got 2 types of unfinished cadence. You've got the imperfect cadence, which is sometimes known as the half cadence. Now, this ends on chord 5, but it can be chord 1 to 5, chord 2 to 5, or chord 4 to 5. You've got 3 different options of how to approach the cadence. Here's an example in C major. I've used chord 1 before chord 5. Listen to how this sounds unfinished. You can clearly hear that the phrase wants to continue, the music wants to move on to something else. Let's have a listen to the example, this time in C minor. Again, you can hear how the phrase sounds unfinished. The second type of unfinished cadence is the interrupted or deceptive cadence. Now, this is a wonderful cadence. The clue's in the name. It's a surprise. Something happens that you're not expecting. And this goes from chord 5 usually to chord 6. Now, the listener is often expecting it to go from chord 5 to chord 1. They're expecting this perfect cadence, but instead they get this surprising sound. Have a listen to the interrupted cadence in C major. You can hear how the music sounds as though it's going to go back to chord 1, but it doesn't. In comes this chord 6 instead. Have a listen to it in the minor key. I love the interrupted cadence in a minor key because chord 6 is actually a major chord, and so you get this wonderfully distinctive interrupted and deceptive sound. So those are the two unfinished cadences. So how do we use cadences? Well, we use cadences to end a phrase in our music compositions, and we need to ask this question: do I want the phrase that I'm writing to sound finished or not? Okay, do I want the music to sound finished? If the answer to that is yes, then we choose a finished cadence, and you've got two options: the authentic and perfect, or the plagal. Now, usually you will use the authentic and perfect. You'll use 5 to 1, but sometimes you may want that more gentle sound of the plagal. If the answer is no, that you don't want your phrase to sound finished, then you choose either the imperfect or the interrupted. Again, typically you'll use the imperfect, okay, so 1, 2, 4 to 5, but sometimes you just might want to bring this element of surprise into your composition by using the interrupted cadence and going from chords 5 to 6. So what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt what is a cadence. Okay, cadence is a series of at least 2 chords that ends a musical phrase. They've got finished and unfinished cadences, depending on whether the music sounds like it's going to finish there or keep going. There are 4 types of cadence that we've looked at: the perfect and authentic, the plagal, the imperfect / half, and the interrupted / deceptive. And then we've looked a little bit at how to use cadences in your composition. If you head over to my site, I've got an article on cadences. There's lots more information there. I've also put together a list of all the different cadences in all the keys, major and minor, so you can use that. You can download it, print it off, use it as a reference point when you're composing. I really hope that's helped you get an understanding of cadences, and I hope that you're able to use them effectively in your compositions.
Look, Glenn, he has charts.
I know. I love it. Charts. Charts are great. And definitely some good stuff there.
I got to give him credit. Like, he explained it nice, concise, quick. I mean, that's a great, quick explanation to I had known the 4-1 relationship. I mean, these are the kinds of things we do in music, whether we know what they are or not. Now I know that the 4-1 is a plagal.
Yep. And that's the thing, is it's not even as important to know what the names are, but more just to get it into your ear so you can hear it. And that's where, again, when we talked about ear training even and learning songs, like, oh, that's, talking to a little kid, like, oh, that's the Star Wars, that's the Star Wars interval, because they hear, that Star Wars song. They can always recognize it, that interval, by hearing the Star Wars song. Same idea. Having that kind of thing.
5.
Yeah. There it is. C to G. Where? Octave.
Octave. It was the octave, right?
Oh, yeah.
See, I'm drinking milk. I'm learning to recognize notes.
Yes, indeed.
Well, that was at Music Theory Academy. Great place to go. I mean, clear, concise. Music theory is something that doesn't have to be intimidating. Right. If you already feel your instrument and you play, at this point, learning the music theory will just help to explain what you're doing. You don't have to use it as your guide. You can use it as your explanation.
I also like to look at music theory as something to snack on. Like, you watch a video like this, it might, even if, some of it might all be reviewed for you, and that's fine. You might pick up something new that you didn't realize. You might see a different relation that you didn't recognize before. Or it could be that, it's all new to you and most of it went over your head. But the beauty of it is that you grab as much of it as makes sense to you at that time. Like if you can get the whole thing, you get the whole thing. And if only part of it makes sense, then work with that and build into the rest of it, because it'll all become useful at some point for sure.
Yeah,
Lots
and
of
snacking on it is a good way to describe it. Because when I hear suggestions of this progression, or this chord arrangement approach, sometimes I go out of my box and try those chord changes.
Yep. And sometimes you've been doing it and just didn't know, which cadence it was called. But, I've been doing that all the time, going from the 5 to the 6. Imperfect or deceptive. Like,
yeah,
that's
and typically if I'm doing it, I'm trying to feel out, like, where do I want this chord to go? How do I want to resolve? And that's what good cadence approach is all about. Do I want it to resolve, or do I want it to feel like it's going to go somewhere else?
And I have a feeling that that's going to make a modification of the Yahtzee game that we were playing there, when we're just going to do roll the Yahtzee dice for a progression. This way we can roll it and be like, we could do we have a perfect cadence right here, or we have little building blocks, perfect cadence, and then we have this over here.
Multiple dice. Dice. You got 4 cadences, so a four-sided roll.
We've got 5 6-sided dice, so we could roll twice and see what we come up with, and that way you have one to throw away.
5 and 6 don't count.
No, it's chord 7 that we don't like. He nato. So we leave him out of it. But
that was some good shit for guitar night, man. Guitar night.
We even saw guitar has something different. And going back to the question a minute ago about
sounded like a keyboard.
Impressive instruments, after we talked about it again for a second, or after people were talking about it in the chat, brass. Definitely some of the brass in particular, something like a trombone, because of the fact that it's not saxophone also, but saxophone is buttons, right? So this note or that note is this button versus that button. But with a trombone, you have to be the right distance as well as the right pressure, kind of like with the bugle. The notes that you're getting are all about how much pressure or how much wind you're pushing at a time. So something like a trombone, I think, would be that. So something like a fretless bass, or any kind of a fretless stringed instrument where you have to be in exactly the right spot. That is something that puts your ear to the test as well. Like, you can see where the spot is on the neck, but you also have to make sure you're matching by ear, because if you're just playing sloppy and you're playing on a fretless, it'll come through big time. Like it'll be very obvious that you're not hitting exactly where you need to if you're not used to playing on a fretless and if your ear is a guide. So a couple of adjustments to my last answer.
And if you are looking for a good trombone player on BandLab, Michael Fortano, find him. He is the best trombone player I've ever come across.
Yeah. Excellent. I believe that's Trombone Hero on BandLab as the username, if I'm not mistaken.
It might be. He legit should be named that.
But that was our 3-hour allotment for the week. I mean, sometimes I know we have other stuff that we could go into, but we do have to get sleep. We do have to let you guys sleep. We have to let your brains cool back down again so that we can, don't overheat and explode anybody's brain too much. But we'll be back again next week.
We're always looking for stuff. So if you got an idea or something you want to see, send us a message.
By the same token, if there's a site that you particularly like that has a lot of good resources like we're talking about here, send it on over. Think about it. I'm sure it's probably something that we'd love to have added to the wall, because we've got a lot of good resources on that wall to look.
Yo, and me and Uni were talking about some IT.
Exactly. And then next week, there'll be more on Thursday of Talking Shhh IT with Glenn and Tony.
We'll see you tomorrow night with the SR show.
Yep, absolutely.
Night, everyone.
Take care. Ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some BandLab clips.
Now for me, that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out. Kind of.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can scratch. With this AI, like scratching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the right
I
spot.
didn't even notice 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.